Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Tim. Today we're going to be doing another automotive project. This is going to be on a 2008 Honda Accord. This is the V6 model. This is the 3.5 liter VTEC. Real common engine. Honda put this in Odysseys, Pilots, Accords. Pretty common engine here. This is the, let's see if you can read this. It's the J35Z3 engine. Alright, so today we're going to do the timing belt replacement. Obviously this would be a lot easier in a shop with a lift. We're going to do this outside because a lot of people don't have access to a lift. So first thing you want to do with any repair, they say, is remove the negative battery terminal. The only reason why I'm going to do it on this one is because I think we have to remove a ground strap, and I might have to remove the alternator or move it out of the way. I'm not sure yet. So that's the only reason why I'm doing it on this job. It is a 10mm bolt. Quick, take that off. Got that done. Next thing you want to do is lift this side on the passenger front and remove the wheel. That's what I've already done here. Put it on a jack stand. You're going to need a jack to support the engine with a block of wood on the bottom of the oil pan, because we're going to have to remove the engine mount later to get access to the timing belt. I took this cover off, or actually just lowered it. It's right here. Covers the crankshaft pulley. That's the crankshaft pulley there. That's going to be interesting. It's actually the first time I've ever done this job on this vehicle, so it's kind of going to be a learning curve for me as well. I've done plenty of repairs, technician jobs, but not timing belt on this particular vehicle before. So I'm going to go with you and figure this out as we go as well. Now, that crankshaft pulley bolt, from what I hear, is pretty tough to get out. So we're going to try with the impact and see what happens. Right now, the first thing you want to do is turn the crankshaft to line up the timing marks. So they say on the top of the pulley, or the inside edge rather, that there's a white mark that you're going to line up on the engine with the arrow. I've yet to find that, so what I'm going to do is remove the serpentine belt, because we're going to have to do that anyways, to see if I can get a better view of it. In order to do that, we need to loosen the belt tensioner. So it is a 14mm bolt. I do have a belt tensioner tool. It's just buried somewhere and didn't feel like digging through to find it, so I'm just grabbing a 14mm long handled wrench here. It's a real long 14mm. You want to grab it up close as you can up towards the engine here, because you're going to be pushing back towards the firewall to relieve that tension. It is a little bit tough on this engine. It would make it a lot easier with the belt tool. You get more leverage, but we're going to do that here. So I'm actually going to have to pause it and do it, and then, because I'm going to need to hold the or need both hands to get it off, because you got to put quite a bit of attention and pry it off. So I'm not going to be able to do it on film, unfortunately, because like I said, I'm going to need both hands for that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, pause it, and come back. This probably may end up being a multi-series video, just because I'm starting on it real late and it's going to be getting dark soon, and I want to try to shoot as much as I can in the daylight because it's hard to see at night. So just give you a heads up on that. So we'll be back in a minute with the dry belt off. Alright guys, I'm back. Got the belt off here. Not completely, just enough so I can see the crankshaft pulley, get it off of the pulley. So what you're going to need is a 19mm. That's what the crankshaft pulley is. Show you what I got set up here. I got a long 18-inch, half-inch ratchet here. Got a 10-inch extension with a 6-inch extension and a deep 19mm socket. I wish I would have filmed the holes. There's There's like 4 or 5 holes on the outside of the crankshaft pulley, on the outside edge that you can see from lower here. You can't see it because it's at the top now and it's cut off here by the frame. But those holes you want at the top, that's where that timing mark is. And I'm trying to show you this on video, but I don't know if it's gonna, because it's so tight and dark down in there. Let me see if I can get a good angle here. So on the front side of the engine, there's a little mark on the front cover. That's not the one you want to line up. And there's 2 marks. I don't even know why they put that one there. But on the back side, if you look down here, see if you can see this. Let me see if I can zoom in. Unfortunately, I don't think it's coming in very clear. Yeah, unfortunately, I just cannot get it to come up clear. So what you're looking for is there's 4 notches in the back side of that crankshaft pulley on the inside, towards the engine cover. One of them has a white mark on it. You want to line that up with the arrow that's pointing on the engine cover, and it's going to be on the back side towards the oil filter. We got those lined up here. Unfortunately, you can't see it because it's so tight in here, and just cannot get a good angle on this camera to zoom in. Let's see. There we go. That's a little bit better. So I don't know if you can see that arrow. It's like a raised arrow. And then there's a white mark. Looks like a little speck on that crankshaft pulley. So you want to line those 2 up. That's what we got here. Now you want to go over to the front side timing cover, which is right here. I'm about to zoom back out now. So on the front side timing cover here, there's a plug right here at the top. You're going to want to remove this plug. It's got a little tab right there next to the engine sticker. So we're going to do that. I can't do it on camera. I'm just going to block the view. Just pulls right out. And there's actually a little tether like that holds it in there. So once you get that, you can see where I got it pried back there. It's tethered, so it's holding it in there so you don't lose it. Right there's a little tether. So you want to pry this back and look in there, and there's going to be another timing mark that you want to mark that line up there. It should be lined up. If it's not, then we need to rotate it 360 degrees. Alright, so let's see if I can get this on camera here. So much crap in the way. Let's see if we get it in this angle. Alright, so if you look down in this hole at the bottom, you'll see like a little raised tab. Stay out of the way. Okay. Alright, there we go. So you'll see that there's a raised tab and there's an indentation in there. Those marks lined up. So we're at top dead center. That's where we want to be. So if you're down at the bottom and you're not at the top, you're gonna have to do a 360-degree rotation on that crankshaft pulley to get it in. But that's right there where you want to be. So now we can move on to the next step. Alright, actually before we move on to the next step, I want to show you. So I've rotated the crankshaft clockwise again. So if you look in here, you'll see that we're not on that timing mark anymore. Let's see if you can get a... You'll see it's over to the right. You can barely see it, but it's not lined up with that mark in the plastic cover, that raised mark. Now, the reason why I did that is because I wanted to show you on the crankshaft. So let me zoom in here. So these are the holes in the crankshaft that I was telling you about. There's these 4 holes. That is where the timing mark is, with the white mark that you want to line up on one of those. So I'm gonna put it on pause here and rotate it back and line everything back. But I just wanted to show you those marks just to give you an idea, help you do it faster. So next time you'll know that those marks need to be up to the top. Alright, so what I want to show you is there's a couple marks on this camshaft pulley here. So you see the mark there. I got it where you can see pretty good. You can see the indentation and the little slash mark in the camshaft pulley behind the cover. You want those lined up, but there's a couple marks on this camshaft pulley that look just like that. You want the one that has a number 1. You can't see it because of the angle here, but right above this mark there's a number 1. That's what you want. That's really crucial because that's showing you top dead center, the number 1 cylinder. I don't know if I can get this in. Let's try this. Get it to zoom in. So right there you can kind of see it. You can see the slash. It's on towards the right side of that indentation of the plastics with the slash, and there's a 1 right above that. That's what you want. So when you're rotating that crankshaft, those holes that I showed you, just use those as a guide. You actually got to go, let me zoom out here. You actually got to go past those. So they're going to be like up here in this top right portion. But it's actually, the marks are actually past those holes. So you got to go a little bit past them. But you can still use them as a guide to, spin the crankshaft over fast until you get there and start going real slow. Check your mark up and down, up and down. You got, it's a little process, time process there. You gotta spin it a little bit, check it, spin it a little bit, check it, and go real slow. You don't want to go past it because then you have to go all the way back around twice. Alright, so now we're ready for the next step, which is actually going to be removing this engine mount and supporting the engine with a jack, because we got to take the timing covers off. There's 5 bolts for each side. You got a left and right side. these plastic covers right here. Let's see if I can zoom in these bolts here. So there's one of them. There's one down underneath the alternator wire there. But there's 5 on each side, and they're 10 millimeters. And then over here you got one next to, let's see if I can get this camera at the right angle. Right there next to the power steering pump pulley there. Trying to get this to zoom in and talk at the same time. There we go. So it's the one on the left is for the cover, the one on the right is for the power steering pump. Which this one looks like it's leaking again. So yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna try to take these bolts off first or do the engine mount first. Either way, I'm not gonna be able to do this on camera because I got to use both hands, unfortunately. So this is your engine mount here. These are the bolts they're gonna be taking out. The ground strap, the little wire going to it. Got another bolt up here. I don't know what size those are yet, but I will find out and let you know. But yeah, that's gonna come out, but to do that you gotta jack the engine up first and support it with a wooden block underneath the jack. So that's holding this side of the engine up. But yeah, I'm gonna put it on pause. I may stop this video section here and start a new video section because or segment it rather, because I don't know how much further I'm gonna go tonight. I may have to start this again tomorrow, but we'll see. So there may be a part 2 of this when we come back, but we'll see you when we get back. Alright guys, so I decided to go a little bit further on this video. It is starting to get dark, and I don't want to pull this engine mount out and leave my vehicle supported, the engine supported rather, on a jack overnight. So not gonna have enough time to finish it with daylight here, so what I'm gonna do is try to get as far as I can to that point and save that for another day, and have to do another video, unfortunately. So went ahead and pulled out these 4 bolts here for the front timing cover here on this front, the one with the engine label. Alright, so like I said, there's 5 10 millimeter bolts. They got a little spacer on them. That's the bolts there. There is one more that's behind this belt tensioner, but you can't really see it here, but it's way down behind it down there if you look down the bottom. I know it's getting kind of dark here. So this tensioner has to come off. That's the next step. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that off. I went ahead and actually spun this pulley over on this tensioner. It doesn't sound that great when you spin it over. You spin it pretty fast as you can anyways by hand. Doesn't sound that good. The bearing doesn't sound great, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace that. It did have a little bit of belt whine noise. So I'll show you the setup that I have anyways. You get it from underneath here, one of the bolts here. You got a long extension. Actually got 2 extensions and a 12 millimeter. Let's see if I can. Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be part 2 of this timing belt job on this Honda. This is a 2008 Honda Accord here. This one is a 3.5 VTEC engine. This particular model is going to be a coupe with the 5 or 6 speed. So if you haven't seen the first part, there's part 1 of this. This is part 2. Actually, the battery died when I was shooting part 1, so I may go back and try to edit and join them all together, but we'll see if we have enough time to do all that. But just wanted to keep going here. So when I finished on the last video, I was trying to get these timing covers off, and I showed you there's these 5 bolts right here. They're 10 millimeter bolts. They go, get this AC line out of the way. So they go in this cover here on the front side, this plastic cover right here. I got them all out, and you can see it's loose right now. It's just sitting on there. The power steering pump on this one's leaking. You can see how wet it is. It's real wet. I could just try changing the O-ring seals in these lines. It's pretty common on these, but this pump's actually an aftermarket pump, and it's kind of hard to steer. Yeah, so turning at low RPMs is really hard. It feels like it almost doesn't have any power steering. It's pretty common on these remanufactured aftermarket power steering pumps. Honda's like the Honda original pumps. So that's what I'm going to go back with, replace this one. So I'm going to take this off anyways to replace it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get it out of the way, because with this ABS unit here and this AC line, it's going to be real tight down in there. So you got these two 10mm bolts up here to hold the top line on. Then you got two bolts that are 12mm, one on the back side, one on the front side down here behind the pulley. And I actually believe it's behind the engine mount here that's going to have to come out anyway, so I think that engine mount may have to come out. What I'm going to try to do though is pull this pulley off and see if I can get to it, because the pulley's got to come off anyways. It doesn't come with the new pump. So what I've done is, I'm sure there's some special tools for this, but I'll show you what I did. So I took a 1/2 inch extension and I wedged it down in here at the bottom of the pulley, and then rotated it to where it, locks, so it doesn't, keeps it from spinning. It's hard to do with one hand here, but basically I put it in like somewhere like this, where it catches on the bottom of the pump. I'm not too worried about damaging this pump, because like I said, I'm replacing it anyways. So I wedged that in there, and then I put a 19mm wrench on that bolt right there to break it loose. So I've got that broke loose. All I gotta do is spin this nut off here, as you can see. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this pulley. I'm actually thinking about maybe replacing the pulley, because it kind of looks like it's not straight anyways. I think it's like $20 for a new one. So actually you can't get this thing off without taking out the engine mount bolt right there. See, it hits it right there. So that bolt is going to have to come out unless I put way too much pressure on it. Yeah, so you're kind of forced at this point to remove this engine mount to go any further. So I can take this cover off. I was going to get this pulley out of the way to remove the other 10mm bolts on this backside cover down in here. I don't know if you can see that right here. I took this bolt out right there, and I took one on the back side, but I haven't removed the lower bolts yet. I was actually going to try to remove this pump and get it out of the way and do it, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. What a shame. That's just poor engineering right there. It's just like a 1/2 inch at most to clear that. But they don't engineer cars to work on. So let's see. I think we're gonna have to just go ahead and do this engine mount. Alright guys, so what I did was I took out this engine mount bolt right here. I removed just that one bolt, enough to get this pulley off here. Let me show you. So once you take that one bolt, you can pull the pulley out for the power steering pump and get it off. So that's out of the way. So now I got a little bit more room to work down in there, as you can see. Ideally, you'd want to take the whole pump off and then probably hit that with an impact wrench. But like I said, I'm replacing this pump, so I do want to back up a little bit on the serpentine belt, the belt tensioner. I forgot to cover last video. So there's 2 bolts holding that in. I got that out here. That's one of the items you have to take out prior to this. So this one looks original. You got 2 bolts holding it. You got this bolt here is just for the pulley, and that relieves the tension when you let the belt loose, when you're taking off the belt. This one is the one that actually holds it. It goes all the way through here. Turn it over without dropping these bolts, so you can see it comes through here. Zoom in on here. So this one was 14 millimeter. This one, well, it's not on the focus. There we go. This one is a 12 millimeter. Be careful when you take this one out, because it's so tight in there in the firewall, or not the firewall, the fender well, that if you're using a ratchet and it's really tight, this one I feel like was over torqued or something, but I had to put a breaker bar on it to get it loose. It was unbelievably tight. But if you can get a long wrench in there, then you're using 12 point. That's what I was doing. It was kind of rounding it. You can see right there, it rounded the edge of the bolt. That's why I don't like using 12 points unless I absolutely have to. But it was the only thing it had that was long enough to get down in there, that was thin. You can't get a 1/2 inch on. There's not enough room to get a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. So I did a 3/8 breaker bar. I should have done that and broke it loose before trying to use the 12 point wrench. That way I wouldn't have rounded the head of the bolt. But I think it'll be okay that the 6 point socket still fits on there. Just kind of wiggle it on now. But it'll go back on and it'll be good. But what I want to is when you're removing it with your ratchet, as you're loosening it, your ratchet's going to be coming out or pushing against the fender well as your bolt comes out. And if you're not careful, you'll pin your ratchet in there. You won't be able to get it off. You won't be able to get the socket and ratchet off of the bolt. As you can see, it's pretty tight down in here. And I'm trying to remember where it was now. It goes on this back side. It's right down below the alternator. So zoom in here. So it's right down in there, in that cavity below the alternator and that engine tag. And then your frame rail's right here. So you only got a couple inches there. If you ain't careful, you'll pin your ratchet and socket in there, and then you'll have to try to get your hand down there and reverse the direction and tighten it back up to get it off. So you don't want to loosen it too much with the ratchet, just enough to get it loose, and then work it out by either hand or a long wrench. So I did want to cover that before I went on any further. The other thing I want to mention real quick is now is a good time to check all your pulleys. So this engine had a whine when you revved it. I should have put it on video before I took it apart, but basically when you revved the engine up, it had a belt whine, and there's a little bit of noise coming out of this alternator. I use my stethoscope and was trying to listen to see where it was when it was running, but unfortunately this is fly-by-wire, so you don't have an actual throttle plate to open and close to rev the engine from out here. So unless you have someone else in there or a scan tool to control the engine RPMs, then it's kind of hard to sit out here and listen by herself. But anyways, I listened to what I could. The alternator does seem a little noisy, and I may end up still having to change that. It's working, but it almost looks like it's an aftermarket, which, you know, again, Hondas, they like original parts. You know, at a minimum, you want to put a Denso brand alternator on this thing. Just don't have good luck with aftermarket power steering pumps, because you can see this tag on this one. It says it's remanned for General Motors, which is kind of weird, but I don't know. I guess it's an AC Delco brand maybe, but anywho, like I said, the power steering assist isn't great at low RPM, so, and it's leaking, and who knows how long ago it was put on, so obviously it didn't last as long as the original, so we're gonna go back with the original Honda, because that's what these really like. The belt tensioner, like I said, it looks original. Pulleys they got a lot of wear and little pits in them and all. They still spin smooth, but if I spin it real fast by hand and put my scope on it, I can hear noise in them. So the tensioner's fine. It's got plenty of tension. It's got plenty of spring tension, so I'm not too worried about that, but I am just going to go ahead and change the whole thing because it comes as a unit. You can get these pulleys on here separate. They do unbolt. The center one's already loose. It actually comes out with that bolt. And this one's got a little bolt that holds it in. But this one's real stiff though. It's smooth, but it's kind of stiff. So what I did was I went and just bought this one here. This is a Litton's brand. This is supposedly the, let's see if I can zoom in here. This is supposedly the original manufacturer for the Honda, supposedly. So I've had good luck with these brands before and Hondas, so I'm gonna put that in here. So in here, you just get a whole new assembly. Comes with the new pulleys. Like this pulley definitely feels looser. And I was looking on these. If you look at the bearings, they're NSK bearings. So I can zoom in there. Yeah, it's NSK bearings on those pulleys, and that's what's on the original. So when you look on here, well, you can't see it because that flange on that bolt's blocking it. Well, when I removed it, it's an NSK bearing. So I do believe it's the original supplier for Honda. But like I said, I've had good luck with those. Certain aftermarket parts you can get away with, and that's one of them. Yeah, so next step here is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and pull this power steering pump out of the way and give me some more room here. Like I said, I'm going to change it anyways, so might as well go ahead and take it off now. And then I'm going to, now I can get to that lower bolt that pulley's out of the way. So, and I already got this line up here loose. You can see it. It's already cracked loose. I just got to pull the bolts out. So you got 2 bolts and the reservoir line here. So I gotta keep changing it. This clamp right here, take that off. I'm gonna put something underneath there to catch the fluid. So I'm gonna do that. I can't do that with one hand and shoot the video, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna take that clamp off, let it drain in the little plastic can or something, and then I'm gonna take this pump off. You get 12mm bolts, one right here, and then you got one down underneath here. It's in between that engine mount. Can run the socket with extension in there, get it to come right out up through here, break that loose. One thing you do want to do whenever you take this back cover off though, because it is tight in there, is you want to get a long 1/4 inch. This one here's, it worked. I got one longer. This is like a 9 or 10 inch, but I got one that's a little bit longer, which would have worked better. Getting down in here to get those bottom bolts out, but I didn't feel like digging for it. That's the first one I saw, so I grabbed that one, made it work. But if you do have a long handle one, you definitely want to use that. But yeah, we're gonna pause right there, and then, like I said, remove this pump and then come back. Alright guys, so on the last video I had to cut it short due to started raining on me, and then it got dark. So unfortunately it's getting kind of late here in the evening, and I don't know how much recording and filming we're going to have to be able to do before it gets dark today. Fortunately I worked long hours during the day, so I don't have much daylight to do this, and I got this outside. Just trying to do this as if, you know, anybody without access to a shop or garage lift or anything like that can do this. So we're gonna keep going with it here. Just hopefully I can get a day where I can get some daytime hours and be able to work on it. So I did want to mention a couple things that I should have started out with, and that was on this crank bolt. So you have this crank bolt down here, which is very difficult to get off. I tried using my impact, my cordless Milwaukee. It's not the high torque, it's the mid torque, but it's the new generation, so it's a pretty strong mid torque. I tried with the 6 amp hour batteries, which are supposedly, you know, the highest output. It would not break it loose. So then I tried my pneumatic Ingersoll here, and it's a 1/2 inch, and it would not break it up loose either with a standard impact socket. So there's a couple of people that make a socket for this application. It's called a Honda crank bolt 19 millimeter socket. This is the Lyle version. The number here is going to be 77080, and it's a 19 millimeter harmonic balancer socket. So Lyle's a company's been around for a while. They make a lot of odds and ends tools, so I kind of trusted them. It is made in Taiwan instead of China, which is a little bit better, but there's a lot of knockoffs on Amazon that so many brands I never even heard of. It's crazy. So I didn't want to trust any of those. I think this was like $20 on Amazon, about the same as those knockoffs. So this socket, put it on with the M18 cordless, and it would not take it off with that either. So I had to resort to my pneumatic there, the 1/2 inch Ingersoll, and then it just took it right off within like 3 seconds. The only thing I don't like about this is, I'll show you this socket here once I get out of the wrapper here. It's gonna be hard to do this with one hand. So it's a nice thick heavy socket, and they got some nice writing on there, so you can see how thick it is, compared to a normal socket here. Oh, pull my other socket off here, so you can see the difference here. So this socket's like almost probably like 2 pounds in weight. So it uses, you know, 3 times the inertia with that weight to transfer all the torque. So make sure all that torque from your impact is going to that bolt. And it works. But the only thing I don't like is, I'll show you here, is on the bolt. It kind of beats up your bolt. Let's see if I can get this to focus. It beats up your bolt a little bit. So, I mean, you're probably going to do like what, maybe 3 timing belt jobs in the life of the vehicle. So it may be good, you know, for all 3 of those jobs, you know, last that long and not need replacing. But you'll see here, it just fits in here, and there's just a lot of play right there. You can see how much my fingers are moving. Like, that's how much play is in that thing versus, you know, a normal socket. I mean, it's just a lot tighter. You know, and it fits really tight on this end, your 1/2-inch drive end. It fits really well there, but I don't like how loose it is. And it's not deep enough either. I can show you here, just like, you can see how much. It's like it doesn't sit all the way down. And I don't know, that slop in there, it may be part of the design to allow it to hit it harder with the impact. I don't know. I don't have any other brands to compare it to. But that's just my thoughts on that. So definitely want to invest in this socket though, or one like it. I mean, the only other option really is going to be this tool here. This is a OEM tool, so you can get this at AutoZone. I got it from Amazon cheaper. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not OEM tools. I was looking at the OEM tools from renting it from AutoZone. They have one that you can rent. But I just decided to go ahead and purchase it. It was like, I don't know, I want to say like $20 on Amazon. This is a brand here. It's Carbine. Never heard of it, but it's got a lifetime warranty and it's made in Taiwan, so seems to be like a good quality anyways. There's a bunch of brands on Amazon for this as well, but I am curious to see how well it fits. Some of the reviews on many of these were stating how there's a lot of play. Let me get this out of the package here. It's kind of hard with one hand. Alright. So, see how it fits on the... You know, one thing people complained about is how loose it is around the anvil. This one fits pretty tight on there. I had to... It's pretty tight. I had to put, you know, a lot of pressure and, you know, had to wiggle it off. So it fits good on that end. But the way this works is you want to stick, you see that like inside where the bolt goes, you'll see the design, the like octagon, and you'll see this, you know, fits right in there. So stick this in here like this. Get over here a better angle, and you can see how it fits in there. And it's not the greatest fit, but it'll work. I mean, there's a little bit of slop. I would like it to fit tighter. I'd almost like it to fit, you know, so tight that I gotta press it in, because on its own weight, it, you know, it at least stays in there, but you can see it drops down. If that power steering line wasn't holding it, it'd probably fall out. But you see how it wiggles. I would like it to go in there so tight that it stays up like this on its own. That's what I would prefer. But anyways, you can use this and put your breaker bar in here, and then use another breaker bar on the bolt, and this will hold the crankshaft from spinning. I didn't want to do that because I'm sure it's going to take, you know, a whole lot of effort, and using like cheater bars, and, you know, maybe putting like a jack handle over your breaker bar, because it's going to take a lot of force. So the socket was just much easier, and I don't have a lot of room here on the ground clearance either. So that is another option, but I am going to use this tool when I put this back on to torque this crank ball. I think it's like 165 foot-pounds or something. I have to look it up again, but I am going to use that to tighten everything and torque it. So we're going to remove that for now. And like I said, you can rent these. You can't rent the socket because AutoZone doesn't stock it, but they'll order it for you to buy it. So once you get your bolt out here, you can see there's a keyway at the 12 o'clock there. You zoom in here. You want to make sure you do not lose that keyway and that it is in there when it goes back together. So you just want to wiggle this back and forth, and it should come right off. Alright, there we go. Alright, so that's the crank bolt. And you can see the keyway stayed in there on your crankshaft. That's what you want it to do. That's where you want it to be. When you put it back together, you want to make sure it's in there. Very critical. So yeah, I'm gonna show you this here. So I mean, it's not bad, but it's just a little bit looser than I would like it to be. Alright, so moving on here. So now you can get access to these two lower bolts. You got one on the left and one on the right for this lower engine cover. And that's, you know, where I was at this point. So I did get all the other bolts out of there from the top. So I'm gonna pull those two out, and then I'm gonna pull that cover out, then I'm gonna come back. This is the lower cover. I already got the upper covers off. So this is the upper covers. You got the left and right. You got 5 bolts on each, and they're all the same bolts, so you ain't got to worry about mixing them up. That's what's kind of neat about it. There are all these little bolts right here. Definitely want to make sure you don't lose them, and that it's a special kind of bolt with that little spacer built onto it. But it's the same bolt for all 5 on each front cover, on the upper and on the lower. So this is the 2 I got out here. So I got those other 2, and I think there's another one. I think there's like 5 total, maybe 6, but I'm gonna go ahead and remove all those. I did remove the ground strap here out of the engine mount right here. I did put the bolt back in there. I like to put the bolt back so I know where it goes and don't lose it. So I just threaded, put it in there. The ground strap's just hanging down there. I did remove the power steering reservoir. It just pulls right up out of this little bracket right here. It's got a little tab right there. Just pulls straight out. You got that out of the way and removed the little reservoir hose there. Just to get some more room in here, because I am going to have to remove that engine mount after I get the lower cover off. That'll be the next step. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'm gonna come back and hopefully it won't be dark by then. Alright guys, so my battery died on the camera here on the last video, so I had to cut it short. I did get the front lower cover off. I'll show you that here. This is it here, and so there's two marks I was talking about on the first part of the video. You got this one here, and then you got this one over here. That's the one you want to line up for your timing mark, on the one on the left there. So you got a total here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 bolts. 7 10mm bolts. Then you got your little access peak hole in there. So I got this off. It has been off before, whoever, or I'm assuming it, I'm pretty sure it has been, but whoever put it back on over tightened the lower bolts here, and you can see they cracked. Where's it at? Get in the camera here. They cracked both of those. Not a big deal, but this doesn't like seal any liquids or anything. It just keeps like debris from going in there. But you do want to make sure these gaskets, they usually stick to the engine. They gotta pull them off. You do want to clean those up and put them back in. There's a little, turn it over here. I cleaned it up a little bit, but I still want to spray it down real good. But you got these little sections here with notches. That's for these little tabs here to go into. You'll see right there. It only goes in one way. They're molded and formed gaskets, so they'll only fit in there one way. Just mess around with them till you get them in there. But you do want to make sure they're in there good and tight. Like, you don't want it hanging out like that when you get it bolted up. So one thing I did want to mention is, or I did start to get into a little bit on the last video before the camera died, is on these videos here, is multi-part videos. You really want to watch all of them before you try to do this job. That way you know what parts you need, what tools, what you're going to be getting into, level of difficulty all the way through. Make sure it's something that you can feel comfortable with. So definitely want to at least go through and watch them all, the whole job, at least once before you get started. Then you can go back as you're doing it, step by step, and then just give you an overall. A couple things that, this crank bolt is really hard for one. It was really easy with the special socket that I talked about, the Lyle socket. But another thing I wanted to go ahead, and this vehicle is new to me, so I don't know the history of it. I ran a Carfax service history report, and it doesn't show a timing belt being done. It's got 157,000 miles on this engine now. The owner, or the guy I bought it from, said that the previous owner had it done around 90,000. Well, you don't know, you can't trust that. You don't know if they really did or not, or if they told them a lie, or even if it was done, if they used cheap knockoff parts. So there's a reason why I wanted to get in here and do this, because I just don't trust it. It's very critical in these engines. They're interference engines, and if these belts break, they will destroy the engine. And I've seen people put cheap belts in and then they break. I've seen people put Gates kits in there, and the water pumps are bad about leaking on those. So I got it all down. It does have a Honda water pump, which looks like it may be possibly leaking. Like I said, I don't have much history. I didn't drive the vehicle very long because I didn't want to risk it with that kind of mileage, you know, assuming the timing belt's never been done. So I do know there was a fluid leak. I do know the power steering pump was leaking. The oil pan was soaked. Frame rails had like oil residue. It could have been from the power steering pump running down, but I hate an oil leak. I can't stand an oil leak. I hate adding oil in between surfaces. I hate drops on the driveway. I just can't stand it. It's like something I just can't deal with. So that's just me. But so I'm gonna go ahead and tackle another job. I should have, you know, did it from the start, but I decided to go ahead since I got it all the way broken down. So behind this oil filter housing, there's 3 bolts here. You can only see the one right here. There's 2 more. If you bend down, you can see them up there in the top. There's 3 bolts that hold that on, and they actually go through and hold this front cover on. So this front cover is actually your oil pump. And real common on these V6 engines on Hondas is they leak from that oil pump. There's an O-ring behind it, and it will run down, and you would think that the oil pan's leaking. I'll show you what that O-ring is. I got it right here, and I only trust these from Honda. So this is a Honda gasket here. Your part number may be slightly different depending on, you know, which J series you have, but this is a 6-speed manual. Doesn't have cylinder deactivation on this engine. So I know for a fact the oil filter housing has a solenoid and a oil pressure sensor into it. It's got 2, and on this particular one, the gasket behind that, those 3 bolts right here, has this little screen. I don't know if you can see that on camera. It's hard to see through the plastic, but there's a little filter screen. They have this model without that screen. Depends on if you have that solenoid or not. This here, when I ordered this from Honda, I forgot to get this gasket. Not a big deal. Using aftermarket here. Victor Ryan's is I think made in Germany. Usually pretty decent stuff. I just don't trust Velcro, to be honest with you, on Hondas. Like Velcro, I'll use them all day long in American cars, but just don't trust them in Hondas. I've seen too many failures. This is not a big deal because there's only 3 bolts right here to get that. If I need to come back and if it leaks, come back and change it with a Honda one. It's not a big deal. Now the oil pump, you know, you got to take the timing belt off, you got to take the oil pan off, you got to take that front plate off, so that's a lot of work. So you don't want to take a chance with that. You know, it's only a couple $1 part. The only other not gasket, but O-ring you'll need is this Honda O-ring here. This is for the pickup tube. When you take the oil pan off, you got to remove the pickup tube. There's that little O-ring for that. And these are all like, the oil filter housing's 12mm bolts, those 3 bolts, but the rest of the front cover bolts are 10mm, I believe. And there's probably going to be about 7 to 10 of them. I'll count them once I get them all out. But to do this, you know, I'd hate to put this all back together and then realize that oil pump's leaking. It's a common failure, especially after you get 150,000 miles. Sometimes you don't see them leak until, you know, over 160,000, but you know, it does happen. But I don't want to go back in here for 100,000 miles, so Therefore, I'm using a Honda timing belt for one. I'm using a Honda water pump. The only thing that I didn't get from Honda is the belt, timing belt tensioner pulley and the idler pulley. The tensioner itself, the hydraulic tensioner, is from Honda. Those are common failures for aftermarket parts, but definitely want to go with Honda on that. The only reason why I didn't go with the Honda tensioner pulley and idler pulley is because I got the same kit that comes in the Asian kit, the Koyos. I believe that's the one that Honda uses. Looking in here, that's what's in there right now, and I have a Honda water pump, so I don't know if it's ever been changed or not, to be honest with you. If it did, they put, you know, Honda parts in it, at least with the water pump, or maybe they didn't even change the water pump. But the Koyo is supposed to be what Honda uses for their manufacturers, so that's what we're going to go with. That's cheaper to get that than to get it from Honda, so that's why I went with that. When you get this crank pulley off, there's going to be this little washer. I don't know what they call it exactly, but you'll see it's keyed at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is where the top dead center is. That's where you want the keyway. This can only go, you know, on with that through that keyway, but you can put it on backwards. You can flip it around and put it on backwards, but you'll see that it's beveled, and it's beveled out, like face it out. So the lip on it, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but you will see the lip there is facing to the outside towards you. You want to make sure that goes back the same way. That's really critical. That keeps that belt on that pulley down there, on the crank. So we're gonna have to take all that off. We're gonna have to slide that off once we get the belt off, so we can get to that front plate to remove it. The other thing you want is a front crank seal that's going to be behind that. You want to go ahead and change that while you got it all apart. And as far as the oil pan, you can see here the gasket sealer that's squished out here is the Honda Bond. You don't have to use Honda Bond. You can. I like the Optimal Gray by Permatex, I believe. They sell at the parts store. That's what I'm going to use, putting it back together. But, you know, Honda Bond, you know, a lot of people say it's made by the other gray silicone makers. Who knows? But I've seen Honda Bond fail, so, you know, I can't say that's any better or worse, but I like the Optimal Gray, so that's what I'm going to use. But you have to, first thing you have to do, that I would recommend doing, is drain the engine oil and let it sit for like a day, if possible, you know, to let that oil all drain out of there, because when you remove that oil pan, it's going to be dripping, and you want it to drip as less as possible, so you're not dripping over everything. But you do have to remove the oil pan. Before you do that, you have to remove the exhaust. Now, I'll show you. I've already done that. You can see it sitting right here. That's part of it right there. So you got 3 bolts on that back converter. You got 3 bolts. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, right here on the front converter. And then you got 3 bolts on the back where it goes into the back of the exhaust, out the back. Let's see if I can go underneath here and show you. See if I can zoom in. It's not coming up because it's kind of dark under here, but there's a flange right there, and there's an exhaust hanger. It's still in the exhaust hanger. I just got it bent out of the way, twisted. Still holding it with the hanger, because those hangers are a pain in the butt to remove, and I don't really need it to come completely out of the way, so I can just push it over like I got it to get the oil pan off. But now you can see, let me zoom back out here. And this is the, you see the oil pan here. You got some big 17mm bolts going into the transmission there. It's got to come out. I cleaned it down pretty good with a rag. It was soaking wet with oil. So that's the next step I'm gonna do, is remove that, and then I'll show you that once we get that apart. But that is the next step in this process here. But yeah, I definitely know that the vehicle has an oil leak. It was low in oil when I first got it and checked it. It was about a quart low, so that tells me it wasn't due for service yet, so that tells me it's leaking or possibly burning oil. But as wet as the engine was underneath, and I had to do a lot of cleaning up on it, I'm gonna pretty much assume that it was leaking oil. So I guess that's gonna be it for right now, and I'm gonna get that oil pan off, and then maybe even the front cover here. I've already broke the 3 bolts loose for the oil filter adapter. I'm gonna take that off and let that drain down into the drain pan. I'm gonna do the water pump last, because I don't want, you know, coolant running down into my oil pan. So I'm gonna wait and last to do that, because when you take that water pump off, it's gonna drain all the coolant, and I just don't want it running down. We'll wait till we get fresh Honda Bond, well, not Honda Bond, but fresh sealant on there. Another thing is once you put that gasket maker, that silicone, gray silicone, on the oil pan and that front cover around the bolts, and I'll show you that when we get there, but you want to, the vehicle really needs to sit for at least 24 hours before you put any oil in it, for that silicone to cure. You don't want it to get saturated in oil, because you don't want to come back and have to do this again. You know, it's quite a bit of work. Let's see, I think that's it for right now. It's all stuff that I should have covered in the first video. I just forgot, and then kind of with the oil pump O-ring here, it's common for leaking. I'll show you that. That's what it looks like there. It gets hard and brittle. It's real common on these, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it now. Even if it's not leaking, I don't want to come back in here in 20,000 miles and start leaking. So yeah, we're gonna take off the oil pan and then come back and show you that. Alright guys, welcome back. We had to postpone some videoing on this job here due to, we had some rain for like several days. Since this is outside in the driveway, I do recommend, if you have a 2-car garage, to pull this in to do the job inside, if you have that access to a garage. So I left off on the last segment, was going to do the oil pump O-ring, which requires removal of the oil pan. So before I went any further, you do have to take the timing belt off to get that oil pump cover off. So I went ahead and purchased this engine support bar here. This is from Harbor Freight. It was like $85, I believe. Got it tied up right here with the chains. It comes with 2 of these support brackets. You can put one down on that end. It's not needed. I'm only taking the engine mount off on this engine mount up here on this side, so it's only going to be this side that needs support. So I put a floor jack under the oil pan with a block of wood, just enough, you know, to meet the oil pan. You're not really trying to force it up. You don't want to break anything on the, it's all aluminum, but just enough, you know, just to support the weight of the engine. You're not really jacking on it. And then I put this bar on here to hold the top part over here. There's a little bracket right here they give you these chains. So put that in there. I mean, I guess you could, if you didn't want to buy this, you probably could get like a 2x4 and cut to fit. You can cut it to fit inside your fender weld from here all the way over to the other side, and you can use a strap or a chain just like this. But I like this because you can, you know, ratchet this to pull the engine up or down where you need it, which is going to be helpful when you try to bolt these back up, because these are not going to line up perfectly when you go to try to put these bolts. I got the 2 bolts out right there. You can see them. The 2 holes, they're 14mm bolts. Right here, this little bracket sits on there. Then you got your ground strap that goes in this 10mm bolt. Make sure you put that back. And then you have a 17mm bolt that goes into the side of the actual mount right here. Goes through there. Definitely want to break this off first. Loosen this one, because once you loosen these 2 bolts, this is going to move so much that it's going to be hard to get it loose. And then you have a 10mm bolt in this plastic housing up here. It goes down in there. I'll take that off as well. So there's 3 bolts holding this bracket that covers up the idler pulley for the timing belt and the water pump. And the first one is right here on top. You can see I got it backed out. There's one down below that one, directly below it. There's one in between these 2 these top bolts here. It's directly in the middle. It's right underneath. Yeah, it's right underneath there. You can't see it. You just got to put a socket in there, and with a ratchet you can get in there with a 3/8 socket and ratchet, and you can feel it. Get on there and pry it from the top. I've already loosened it up. Let me see. And then there's another one. So there's a total of 3 bolts. You got this one, the one directly below it that you got to get from the bottom, and then the one, like I said, it's in between these 2 right here. So the one you got to get from the bottom, it's not going to let you pull it out all the way. I believe I took the other one out. What did I do with it? Yeah. So this is the one that you can't see. It goes right in like this, underneath this bracket here. Let me see if I can zoom in here. It's not wanting to zoom. There we go. So it goes right in there. I don't know why it keeps zooming out on its own. And then you can get that one out. I pulled it out. It's a 14mm bolt. It's right here. The one on the bottom you can't, because it's going to hit the frame rail. So when you're using your ratchet and your socket, make sure you don't back your ratchet into the frame rail so you can't get it off the bolt, the socket. You just want to loosen it up just enough to get that ratchet out and that socket off, and then use preferably a ratchet wrench to pull it the rest of the way. But you won't be able to remove it. It's going to have to slide out with this bracket. And then you got this one here, which I almost got out. So then you got that little 10mm bolt right here that I've already removed. So you can see I got it loose. It's just sitting in here. I gotta back this top bolt out here a little bit. It's not all the way free yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. Just so time consuming to actually do this on video, so that's the reason why I went ahead and did it. So I'm trying to make this video not super long. I mean, this is like a 6-hour job. I don't want to make a 6-hour long video. So a lot of, removing the bolts are going to be skipped just for video length purposes. I did want to show you though, I marked the timing belts here. I got this Sharpie pen. I got this from Lowe's. It's a white Sharpie. It's an oil-based paint pen marker. So I marked up the line here with the mark in the pulley and on the engine, and then just drew a line right across the white line across the belt. Did the same on the back cam. Get the mark over there, and I did the same on the bottom down by the crank. Go down here, see if you can see these. So I marked the top one there. It lines up with the little arrow on the little arrow behind it, just above it. It's lined up at 12 o'clock above the keyway. And then I marked it down on 2 spots on the belt. Down here at the bottom, you can see the little 2 spots. So what I'm gonna do is show you what I recommend doing if you've never done this before, is to transfer those marks over to the new belt and then mark the new belt. And the reason being is it's really easy to get these engines off a tooth on this back cam sprocket right here if you've never done this, because this one has like a lip, and it's kind of hard to see the mark on this one as well because it's buried down in there. It's not, you know, it's easy to get to is this one, and this one you can see the, you know, the ribs and the pulley. This one has like a smooth lip on the front, so it's kind of hard to gauge where the belt's engaging exactly. So if you've never done this before, it's easy to get that back one off a tooth, and it's gonna run like crap and throw a check engine light. Probably not gonna do any damage, most likely with 1 tooth or 2 tooth off, but you definitely don't want to have to go back in here and do this all over again and just to move it over a tooth. So it's real critical to get it right the first time. I know there's a lot of people that probably done this 100 times that don't need to do that, but that's not for you. This is for, you know, someone that's never done it before. The cover that goes on this engine mount here, I took it off. It just slides down on here. So you can see it's got an arrow pointing to the front of the engine. Just the way it goes on there. Just push it down on there. It also has this groove notched in this thing here, but it sits just like that. It's a little dust cover. So you'll see it has this little groove in here. That's going to sit on top of this little flange right here that they got raised. So you want the arrow pointing up, you know, towards the front bumper. I pulled that off just to look in there, see if that engine mount's busted. It does have some, you know, little slight cracking going on. It's not busted. It is a good time to replace it if you're in here. This one doesn't necessarily need replaced right now, but it could need it in the future, so I'm debating on if I'm gonna go ahead and replace that or not. I may end up going ahead and getting that and replacing it. So one other thing I did want to show you too is I got the other crank bolt that I was mentioning in the other video. I know I showed you the Lyle version, which I actually used to get the bolt off, but I actually bought this one too. It's OEM Tools. It's a 19mm crank bolt socket. It's, part number 25274. So it's just like the Lyle, but it's a little bit different. If you put the, see if I can do this on camera. I need both hands, unfortunately. All right. So when you put the bolt in here, it sits down further on the bolt. The Lyle one doesn't go deep enough, in my opinion. And when you rotate it back and forth, this thing fits much tighter, has a lot less play than the Lyle. Now, whether it works as well or not, that I don't know because I haven't tried it. The Lyle may use that little bit of play to get a little more hit on the bolt, but I do like how this one fits tighter on the bolt. I feel like it's going to damage the bolt a whole lot less. Just want to give you that. If you're debating on which one you want to get, they're both about the same amount of money online. I think I paid $25 for that one and the lisle. So yeah, we're gonna take off the timing belt next, because that's the next step. So got that all marked, and to do that and to change the water pump, this bracket has to come off for the engine mount, which I already got it loose. So I'm gonna pull that one off. I'm gonna pull that out, and then we're gonna start removing the belt. But yeah, there's a couple different ways to remove the belt. You can start, according to Honda, you're supposed to take your battery bolt here, one of these right here, you get two of them, and threading it into, there's a threaded rod on the back side of this. Can't really see it, but it's on the back side of the timing belt tensioner, and you can thread it in from the back side and put pressure on that tensioner, and then you can remove the idler pulley. But I'm probably just going to take off the hydraulic tensioner first, just the two 10mm bolts I believe that holds it on, and then because we're not going to reuse that thing anyways. So I'm probably going to do it that way. But just wanted to show you that. This is your ground strap here. Make sure that you don't cover it up. It's easy to get it tucked under this boot when you put it back on. The reservoir for the power steering pump, I got it sitting up here out of the way. Just make sure you put something underneath it like a towel, because it's going to drain some fluid for a while. And then let's see, what else do I want to say about that? I think that's it for now. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and pause the video and get that bracket out of the way, and then we can start taking off the timing belt. Alright, I went ahead and pulled that bracket off. So this is it here. I left these two bolts in it right here. Just pulled it off with those two bolts still in there. Move my hand here so I can show you the third bolt. So that third bolt I was telling you about that sits under here, it's right there. That's where that long third bolt goes. And these all might be the same length. I gotta check that. But now you can see your water pump pulley there. And you know, this bracket has these flanges on each side, one on this side and then one on this side. Kind of keeps the belt guided so it doesn't back off. And then you get the little spacer on the crank that does the same thing, a little beveled washer. So yeah, and so now with that out of the way, you can actually see in there pretty good and actually have some room to work. You know, with this engine support, not everybody does that. I've seen people let the engine just hang. If you're real quick at the job, I guess that's okay. I'm shooting a long video here for, you know, very limited time to spend, you know, on this job at a time. So I'm coming here and coming back, and you know, a little bit here and there. So, and at a time of making a video. So, you know, if you can knock this job out in like 2 or 3 hours, like some technicians that do this all day long, then yeah, you could probably get away with just letting it hang. I just don't want to let the engine hang and put too much stress on the other engine mounts for an extended period of time. Also, it's going to help a lot when I get to bolt that bracket back up, because like I said, it's going to be tough to get it lined up and get those bolts started in the threads without cross threading them. You don't want to do that. So yeah, now we're just going to go ahead and take off the timing belt tensioner, the hydraulic tensioner. I'll go down and show you that. I don't know if you can see it from here. So yeah, if you see a bunch of oil, I cleaned it up a lot, but there's a bunch of oil like down in here. down on this back side in particular, running down behind your oil pan, chances are your oil pump O-ring's leaking. So, you know, you got to go this far to change it anyway, so you might as well go ahead and do it at this point. So that's why I'm going ahead and going that extra step. I've already got all the bolts out for the oil pan. I just got 4 bolts in there loosely holding it up right now. But I took all the other bolts out and broke the so when you get those bolts out, this gasket, this Honda Bond, seals pretty good, so it's not going to just fall off. You got to pry this thing loose. You got to break that seal if it had a good seal to begin with. But I'll show you that too. Actually, I'll go ahead and show you what I did. So if you, Honda says you can take a screwdriver or a pry bar and at each 4 corners pry it loose. It's really hard to do that on the back side by the transmission. It's really hard to get a pry bar or screwdriver in there. So what I did was, when I got all the bolts out for the oil pan, on this back side you'll see this tab right here where my finger is, and then if you look further back behind this, where this bolt going in the engine here, there's another tab underneath that back behind it. You can see it there. So you can see those 2 tabs are at different heights. So you can get your pry bar just like that, and then let me show you how I got it in here. I got it, you know, the curved tip there, I got it facing up. So you stick it in there between those 2 tabs, and then you can press down on this tab here. Let me zoom in on it. And you can press down on this tab right here where my finger is, and you can break it loose on this corner. And once you get it broke loose on one corner, then it's easier to work your way around. But I had to put quite a bit of pressure on there. I was almost at the point I put so much pressure on there that I thought I was going to break that tab off with my pry bar. So it's not going to come off easy. Just to give you a heads up on that. Unless you know, if it comes off easy, it didn't have a good seal. And the surface wasn't cleaned, or didn't set long enough, because they recommend, Honda says 3 to 4 hours before putting any oil in it. I'm going to do longer than that. I'm probably going to go at least 24 hours. I might even go a couple days, to be honest with you, to let that silicone fully cure, because it takes I think it's like 3 days to fully cure. So I might let it fully cure before I put any oil in it, because this is not my main transportation, so I have that option. Let's see. But yeah, so the next, I've already removed everything off that crank pulley, so the belt can just slide off there now. So right now it's got a lot of tension on it, so we're going to remove that tensioner. You can't really see it from here. Let me see if I can get a better angle here. But you're gonna want to do it from underneath. Hang on, repositioned here. It'll be much easier on the lift. Alright, so you can see the hydraulic tensioner right there, and you can see the 10 millimeter bolt right here, and there's another one directly on top of it. Actually, you can see it right there. So you got to take those two, and that tensioner will come out. And it would take pressure off of that. So that's probably what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then come back here. Alright, so I got the tensioner, hydraulic tensioner off. Is right here. You got these two 10 millimeter bolts here. hold it on. Just pull those out, and you got both of them from underneath with a 1/4 inch ratchet and 10 millimeter socket. Once you get those out, your tension is going to be off the belt, which you can see here. Now I can just, on this bottom side of this cam, it's just loose. There's no tension. There's no tension around the crank right now. So we're just going to start pulling it off. I'm going to replace the idler pulley there down below the water pump, right here. Where that blue paint is on that bolt. And then I'm going to replace the tensioner assembly and pulley, which is right down right in here. So I'm going to pull those off. You got one bolt in the middle of that idler pulley, and then you got one bolt sticking out there, a little flange bolt on that tensioner. So we're going to go ahead and pull the belt off and then take those off. Alright, so I went ahead and cracked these off here. Let's see if I can get the zoom in right. Alright, I'll show what happened to the picture there. So I went ahead and cracked these two bolts. They're both 14 millimeters. You can see the blue in there is backed out right down here. I just got my 3/8 ratchet on there, right here, and then the same thing right here for the tensioner pulley. I did have to remove this ground strap here. This is the ground strap that went to the motor mount. This is the other side of it. The reason being is because it goes directly right across from that bolt onto the frame rail, and you can't get your socket and ratchet on there. You can use a wrench, but I'm going to be torquing this bolt, so went ahead and took it out of the way so I can get a ratchet and socket in there, so I can get a torque wrench in there to torque it later. So just want to show you that. I'm going to replace both of those, and then probably going to take the water pump loose after that. Got a couple of 10 millimeter bolts holding that. But I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling those out. Alright, so I got the water pump off. What I did was, there's 5 little, we got the 3 bolts that hold that bracket for the engine mount that goes through there, the larger bolts. And then you got the 5 bolts, little 10 millimeter bolts to hold the rest of the pump on. Once you take those bolts off, you're gonna have to wedge a screwdriver down in between. Just be real careful. You don't want to mar the surfaces. You're just gonna pry gently. You're gonna crack it, break the seal, and once you break the seal, it's gonna start dripping. So I just let it drip for a while until it quit dripping. Got a good, good steady drip where it's flowing pretty good. Crack it enough where it's doing that, so I can catch all the coolant down in my pan. I didn't want to pop it off and it go flying everywhere all over the ground, so kind of just did a controlled drain and let it, direct it into the pan. So just, did one corner at a time, or cracked the back corner, let it drain because was the lowest point anyways. So got that drained, got the water pump off. You can see down here, still got a rag in there soaking up some of the coolant in one of the portholes. I'm just gonna soak it up because it keeps coming back, so just trying to get that surface dry for the new gasket. And then got the tensioner and idler pulley off. Next is going to be that oil pump front cover on the engine there. Oil pump's built into the front cover. So I'm gonna go over here and show you real quick. So this is your tensioner pulley here. You got this one 14mm bolt holding it on. There's a little spacer in the back too here. Make sure you don't lose that. Bearing seems pretty good on this one. It's a Koyo. I don't know if this is OEM or not. I don't know. I think that's the brand they use. It doesn't say Honda on it. That's the brand that I got aftermarket to replace it with. Same thing with the idler here. The tensioner, I believe, is Honda. The hydraulic tensioner. It doesn't say Honda, but the new one doesn't say Honda either. But it looks very similar, has similar type markings. So I'm assuming that's a Honda. The water pump was definitely Honda. The belt doesn't have a name on it. It's wore off, so I don't know what brand that was. It could have been Honda. Here's the timing covers. This is the water pump here, the old one that I got off. So this gasket will not go back into this little groove. It's got deformed, so it could have been leaking. But yeah, see, it says, see if I can zoom in here. It says Honda right there. On this pulley, it says NSK USA, and it's got a part number there. So let's just see if I can zoom in on that. So that's rebranded NSK's, who makes the water pump for Honda. So I don't know if that was original or if it's been done this time about. If it has, they went back with Honda parts, it looks like. So that was good. If they did do it, I just don't know if it's original or not. But I do have a Honda water pump here. This was from the dealer. You gotta be careful with buying this stuff on Amazon and eBay. It's a lot of counterfeit Honda parts on there. It is tempting because it's a lot cheaper, but I don't trust them. So this is from the dealer. This one comes with a gasket already on there. You can see through the package here, through the plastic, which is nice. A lot of aftermarket ones don't. You have to like hold it up there, and it's just very frustrating to get in place. The Honda says to replace this idler pulley bolt, so I know why, because this is the new one here. This is from the dealer as well. I'm gonna replace it because it has red Loctite on it. That's why. You know, it's just like a couple $1 part. It's not worth it to reuse it. I'm sure you can get away with it, putting some Loctite back on there, but I'm not going to take a chance for a couple $1 part. I'm already in this way. I'm just going to do it right. I like to do it once and be done with it. So that's that. It's up to you if you want to reuse it. The manual says to discard it, so that's what I'm going to do just to be safe. Got all these cleaned up here. Got my gaskets. Make sure you get your gaskets back in place. They're going to come off and they're going to be sticking to the engine, and all these are got little tabs that you can line up in there. It's pretty self-explanatory how you push them back in there. If you have a gasket that's torn or real bad, I would replace it. These look okay. I know I've heard of people taking this lower cover and drilling holes in the bottom down here so oil and coolant can drain. I don't believe that's necessary. I'll show you why over here. So on the bottom down here on this lower cover, you'll see a notch right here where my finger is. It's a little cutout notch. You zoom in there. So that's made for stuff to drain out. that's where the coolant, you know, a lot of it ran out whenever you pull the water pump. Of course, it's going to come down over here on the back side. I did put this oil filter back on because I didn't want coolant running down into the journals, because it runs down right over those bolts, and I didn't want coolant running in there. So I did put that back on temporarily. I'm going to take it back off now because I'm going to pull this cover off, which is the next step. This pulley here for your crankshaft, it just, once you get the belt off, it just slides. There's the only thing holding it is that keyway. You don't want to lose that keyway though. We're just going to slide that off, and then there's going to be the ring for the crank sensor behind it. You know, slide that off. Just pay attention. You know, it only goes on one way with that keyway. Just make sure you got that keyway in there when you put it back together, or you're gonna have a lot of problems. Yeah, I got the connectors off for the, depending on what engine you have, you may not have a connector, electrical connector going to your oil filter adapter housing. But yeah, I got that connector off, just hanging down here. That's what this is here. Just make sure you know, make note of all that and put them back in. There's 3 bolts that hold this oil filter adapter housing on. One's longer than the other 2. It's hard to mess it up. I mean, you just put them in there. The short one won't catch the threads in the short hole, in the long hole rather. So you'll know that, you know, that's where the long bolt needs to go, because a short bolt won't go deep enough to even thread in. Just note that. Let's see, what else can I mention up here? Just clean up the gasket surface. I already got this cleaned up pretty good. Once I get done, you know, soaking this coolant, I'm gonna go over it one more time before I put the water pump on. And I'm probably gonna go ahead and maybe do that now and then take the cover off. I'm not sure yet. Haven't really decided yet, but I'm gonna decide here pretty quickly. So yeah, my engine, this is the J3, so it has the 2 connectors on the oil pump housing, oil filter housing rather. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's the J35, but it's the Z3. There's a J35 Z2 that's a little bit different. And I don't know if it's because this one's 5-speed or not. It might be the difference. So yours may be a little bit different. I think on the J2, the serpentine belt tensioner is different too. It's like a hydraulic tensioner, I believe, where this one's not. This one's a spring tensioner. Yeah, so one thing I'm probably going to do whenever I put the power steering pump on, I'm probably going to remove this thing here. It's like some Allen keys, looks like a 5 or 6 millimeter. Probably going to take that off to make that pump installation a lot easier. But yeah, that's pretty much it for right now. We're going to get that, I think there's 10 millimeter bolts that hold that front cover on down there. We're going to take that off next and show you what that looks like. Alright guys, so I got the oil pump off here. This is what this looks like here. So you got 7 10 millimeter bolts holding it here. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 up here. So all 7 of these 10 millimeter bolts are going to be the same length, so you don't have to worry about getting them mixed up or anything. So you do have to take off the oil filter adapter housing, which holds your oil filters. 3 bolts and an O-ring in here. Mine has a screen in it. Some of them do, some of them don't. You just gotta look, see what yours has, what your engine calls for. Got a connector right here for the oil pressure. Make sure you unplug that. Then you gotta take the oil pan off. You may have a sensor in your oil level sensor in your oil pan, which I do on my particular vehicle, so you can unplug that. You got to drop the exhaust, and once you get the oil pan off, you'll have to remove the pickup tube that's underneath. I'll show you that right here. So this is the pickup here. You got 3 bolts, 2 right here, 1 right there. This is what sucks the oil. It's going to bolt to the bottom of your oil pump here. These 2 bolts here, and it's actually going to be holding it on, so you can't remove this till you pull this off. These 2 bolts here. This bolt here goes to through the baffle on the oil pan. So yeah, you got to pull this off to get the oil. Once you get that off, and these 7 bolts, then you can pry this thing loose. It doesn't take a lot of effort to pry it off. You just got to be careful you don't mess up like any of your surfaces, like in your water pump mating surface or anything like that. So these are the 7 bolts here. That's your crank sprocket with the keyway in it. Show you what it looks like in here. So that's your crankshaft right there in the front. I cleaned that off because there was some debris that fell down on it. Since we're putting a new crank seal in there, I wiped it off. You do want to coat this with a thin layer of oil, especially right around that area right there that's shiny. That's where it's going to ride on that seal. You want to make sure there's a oil coat around that. You do want to coat the inside lip of the seal itself before you put it on. Get this surface clean. You want to have all your old gasket material off. You want to see shiny metal like this here. You want basically get all the residue off you can. You want to use something that's going to dissolve oil, like brake clean, to get that surface nice and dry and oil free. Once you get it wiped down clean and dry, you don't want to touch it with your hands or anything. Get the oil from your hands on there. It's real critical that is a clean, dry surface for your silicone gasket maker, liquid gasket they call it, to adhere and cure. So right now, you know, the bottom part of that oil pump is part of the oil pan as well. We don't need to put any down there until we actually put the oil pan on, though. Let's see if I can go up top here. It is real critical to get all your timing marks lined up before you take that belt off and get to this stage, because once you take that belt off, you don't want to rotate any of these cams, or the crank especially, because the crank's going to rotate like twice for every time one of these cams rotates. So if you were to rotate that crankshaft, you can be off. Now on this oil pump, you'll see on the crankshaft, let me see if I can zoom in here. So there's a flat spot, that dark flat spot by where it goes into the engine. That flat spot's going to ride on your oil pump. You don't want to rotate your crankshaft to line that up. You want to rotate the oil pump to get that lined up, but you want to line that up when you put this on. Let's see, everything here is nice and clean. I got the water pump off. Go back over here. All right, so I've already replaced this front crankshaft seal here. That's the new one in there. It sits down just slightly inside here. It's like a, you know, it doesn't sit flush with this oil pump. It sits down recessed, maybe like a millimeter at most. But it bottoms out. There's a lip on the bottom then down there that when you push it in, you'll see that flat spot right there in the oil pump. That's got to go on top of the crankshaft on that flat spot. This rotates very easily, so this is the part that you want to rotate to line up. That seal, the O-ring there, is the one that's common for leaking. That's the one we're going to replace. I also want to replace this oil pickup tube O-ring right here. I got both of those. We're going to put those in there. Yeah, everything's cleaned off here pretty good. Nice and shiny, clean surface. I'm going to go over this one more time though. You always want to do one final cleanup right before you install it. So you want to run your bead of silicone here on this inside edge. So you want it right around through here. You know, follow my finger here. You want to go right down. You want to get real close to this O-ring. You don't want this to actually go into that O-ring surface though. So it's a real fine line of too much or too little. Honda says you put a 2.5 millimeter line. If you look on a ruler, just to give you an idea, it's going to be 2 marks and then a half a mark on those little tiny marks. So, you know, not very wide at all. You definitely don't want to get too much. You don't want to get too little. Too much, you're going to have it squishing into the, you know, areas you don't want it. You don't get it sucked up in your oil pump and plugging stuff up. Too little, it's not going to stick in here very well and seal. So you got to find that perfect balance. Whoever did this before, or maybe even from the factory, did have a little bit of silicone right down and through here on that O-ring. A little bit's probably not going to be bad, but you just don't want a lot going down in there. Let's see. So yeah, I got the seal in there. I like doing it like this with it off. Some people like putting the seal in when this is on the engine. I think it's easier. You just turn it over here, stick your screwdriver down to here and just catch the seal only, punch it out. You don't want to mar this surface at all, but on the oil pump, but just make sure you only contact the seal with the screwdriver and it pounds right out. That's what I did. I already put this one in. It's a little bit hard to do with one hand and film it, so I've already done it. This is the new seal. Just got to put some oil around it. Putting it in, I got a seal driver kit. Get my finger out of the way. This is what that looks like here. I used the wider end here first, knocked it down flush. I wanted it nice and square. Knocked it down, just used a rubber mallet here. You don't want to beat it too hard. You gotta kill it to get in there. Some people like to put like brake grease and lube around the outside edge before they knock it in to make it go in easier. I'm not a big fan of that. I like it to be in there snug fit, want it tight. So I don't put any lube in there, just pound them in. You do want it square, nice and square. If it's not sitting, if it's cocked at all, it's not going to seal, and it's going to rip that seal up when that crank starts spinning. Like I said, it bottoms out. You just got to know when you hit that bottom and don't overdo it. It doesn't take a whole lot of force. And that's why I like using the rubber hammer as well. So yeah, put this on there, got it nice and flush. Then I flip this around to where the tapered end is where the way it is now. So that fits right on the outside edge of that seal. You don't want to hit the inside of that seal. You want to be almost barely clearing this aluminum housing when you pound this seal in. You definitely want to be clearing it because it's recessed and you got to drop it down in there, but you want this thing to fit, as close to that outer edge as possible, because there's a spring that goes in the middle there that you don't want to knock out, that holds that seal tight from leaking. Here's the old seal. It's the old seal in the new package. It's a Honda seal. That's what it looks like out. But yeah, I actually put this on top of the old one and used it, to pound it in there to get that recessed. That way it was like a perfect fit. You can get a socket as well. If you got like a large socket, maybe like a 36 millimeter or something. I don't know, I didn't test the size, but as long as it's, goes around that outer edge and clears the aluminum housing, you'll be fine. Let's see. So yeah, to replace these O-rings that's going to be on the back here, the one that's common for leaking, and this one, I'm just going to get a little pick that I got here, pry those out. You don't want to gouge the surface or anything. Just make sure you grab the hold of the O-ring, just the rubber itself. So I'm going to do that. You want to coat this one. Actually, I'm going to coat both of them with just a light bead of oil with my finger. Just a real light coat. And so I'm going to put the new one in over here. I'm going to coat it with oil first, and then I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm going to clean off the aluminum part with some brake cleaner after I do all that for the final preparation. A couple of things with scraping this old gasket material off. Just down here on this mating surfaces. I used an ice scraper. This here. This is a brand new one, so it was nice and sharp and crisp. This hasn't been used on any icy windshields and put gouges and nicks in it. You want, you know, a nice, clean, straight edge. You can use something like this here, glass scraper. They make these with plastic blades, like I have here, plastic razor blade. That's the safest bet, using plastic. I used majority of it. I used this. I did use a real razor blade, real lightly. I don't recommend doing that unless you're experienced, because you can gouge it very easily with a razor blade on that aluminum. It's real soft. You got to hold it real lightly and keep it real flush and square to the surface to use that. But like I said, if it's your first time, I don't recommend doing that. They do have metal scrapers like this. Like I said, I don't recommend this either unless you're experienced with it. Something like this here. If you do something like this, make sure you run your finger down the edge of it and that it's smooth. This one's brand new. I bought this and didn't end up using it actually, but it's real smooth. I ran my finger down in the store, make sure there wasn't any nicks or anything. This is the O-ring here for the oil pump, Honda ring. This is the oil pickup. I mean, this is the oil pump O-ring housing. That's a Honda as well. The bolts on this, Honda says to put Loctite on. So I got some Loctite here, thread locker. This is 243. You can use 242. They're both medium. The only difference is 243 I like better because it has more resistance to oil. Once the engine's been opened, I like to use this stuff, especially bolts like this that are going to be going into the engine in the oil pan. I'm actually probably not even going to use that on the oil pan though. Just on this oil pump. It's the only place it calls for it on those 7 bolts. The RTV, I'm not a big fan of it. I've seen it fail many times. Seen it fail on low mileage engines. I prefer a rubber gasket. You know, this one's got 154,000 miles on it and it was leaking. I got my Ford 4.6 liter. It's got a rubber gasket on the oil pan with 300,000 miles on it and does not drop a drip. I prefer that. It's a lot easier to clean. You don't have to scrape all the silicone off. And when you do replace it, it just seems like it's more durable, holds up better. Honda's been known for their oil leaks for a long time, and I just think it's bad designing, poor designing. They have a lot of weird plates and stuff on the vehicles, just a lot of areas that are prone to leaking that I think they could have done better. Personally, but it is what it is. Can't change that. So Honda Bond's real good choice to use. It's a real safe choice. I was going to actually use some Permatex Ultra Gray, or Optimal Gray they call it. Optimal I think it is. It's like the most expensive one they have, the high torque one. But I actually changed my mind. I'm going to try this Mopar stuff here. Got this on Amazon for like $15, I think. I would probably recommend getting it from a dealer because this looks like it's a dated package. It's got a 2016 date on it, so I don't know how good that's going to be. Getting it from the dealer is, you know, it's going to be most likely be fresh because they go through it all the time. So I would probably recommend getting it from the dealer, and I probably should have done that, but we're going to give it a try. This actually was tested on a YouTube channel, Project Farm, that I'm sure most people are familiar with by now, and this one was did the best in the testing, so I'm gonna try to give it a try. I never used it before. The Honda Bond came in the top 3 in that test, so you know, Honda Bond's still good, but this did better, so gonna try that and see what kind of luck we have with that. Like I said, I'm not a fan of gasket maker silicone. I really wish they would have put like rubber gaskets, but you know, it is what it is. Got to deal with it now, so it's already designed. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna put the thread locker on the bolts first. Just put one bead down it real quick down the threads, and then once I do that, first I'm gonna clean everything up and get these O-rings replaced, and then coat the oil on the seals and the O-rings. And then once I get it all cleaned up and spotless and dry, I'm gonna put the thread locker on the 7 bolts, and then I'm gonna put this RTV silicone. Reason being is I want to have everything ready to go. Once you put this silicone on there, you want to have it installed in about 4 to 5 minutes. If you go longer than 5 minutes, then you might as well scrape it off and start over, because it's not going to seal very well. That's one of the things that came up in the testing on Project Farm on those. And you know, instructions have always been to, I think I've seen instructions a few times to let it skim over, but you definitely don't want to do that. Honda definitely doesn't recommend it. They recommend doing it in 4 minutes or starting over. So you definitely want to let this thing sit a good 24 hours before you put oil in it, and once you're done. So I'm gonna get this all ready, and then we're gonna get this back together and start getting the timing belt back together after that. All right, one thing I did want to cover real quick is this keyway on this crank. You'll notice that it's beveled on that bottom end right there. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. Let's see if it helps if I lay it down. Now you'll see that one end's beveled up. If you look on your crankshaft, it's hard to see because it's so dark, but if you look at it, you'll see it goes up at the back. It gets real thin. That's where you want that bevel to match up. So you want it in just like that. You know, just like this. Slide it where this goes in that thin, because it's real thin in the back, so you want the thin area to go in the back. That's how you want to line that up. So just wanted to cover that real quick. All right, so we're gonna get that back on, and then we'll be back. All right, guys, so we got the silicone on there, and got the front oil pump back on. Basically, if you have this thing in time for those notches I was showing you on the oil pump, you want basically 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. See if I can zoom in here. Got this in here, got these bolts tightened up. See if I can get down here. It's hard to see without being on a lift. So got the crank. You want to make sure your crank seal is in all the way around. You might have to wiggle it around a little bit. It was catching on the upper lip on this one when I had it in there, so I had to reseat it in there. Just make sure it's all flush, that seal, and seat it around the crankshaft before you start your engine or go any further. I'm gonna go ahead and put this oil filter on because one of the bolts goes through that, the long bolt on that top right corner, right up in there. That one actually goes through the oil pan, or oil pump rather. One thing you want to do is hook this connector back up here. Let's see if I can get a better light in here. This connector hanging going down to the oil pump here. Definitely want to go ahead and hook that back up before you forget. One thing I did want to note is our covers, you don't want to use any abrasives like little sanding discs or Scotch-Brite, especially the little pads on even the little plastic ones on a drill, or little sander die grinder, because that debris is going to sling all into your engine, and you don't want that at all. It's not good getting all that abrasive debris in the bottom of your engine, because your engine's open at this point. Let me see, I gotta reposition here. So I was going to put the or show you with the silicone bead that I did, but I didn't have time. It was really setting up with this. It's kind of humid out here and warm temperatures, so it was trying to set up on me, so I had to get it in there rather quickly. So I like to actually got it together sooner. Got all these bolts torqued down. I hand tightened them down, and I went with my inch-pound torque wrench and tightened them all down to torque. You don't have to do that if you're experienced. Like, I know what it feels like. I was really close. I think one of them I had to do like quarter return with the torque wrench, but you know, I pretty much know what tight feels like on these aluminum bolts with these 10mm bolts. If you don't, get a torque wrench so everything's nice and snug and torqued evenly, so nothing gets warped or anything. You definitely want that surface as flat as possible so it doesn't leak. I used the inch-pound. Honda says it's 8.7 foot-pounds, which is weird. I don't know why they just didn't round it to 9. But I did a conversion, did it 105 inch-pounds on my inch-pound torque wrench. It actually comes out, 8.7 comes out to like 104 or something, but I rounded up for the margin of error, the 2% margin of error on these torque wrenches anyways. It's not going to hurt it. Probably could have even went a little more. But you definitely want to check, make sure that silicone, you can see it oozing out down there a little bit. It's not bad. You definitely want it to come out a little bit, because that means you know, make sure you applied enough. But yeah, that's all good. Now I can go ahead and get the water pump back on, and with that oil filter housing adapter. But I did want to show you real quick show you what Honda, since I wasn't able to show you on the oil pump, but this is the diagram from Honda. They say a 2.5mm bead here. So this is the line that you want to go with your silicone, that around the O-ring, you know, that portion. Like, hang on one second, get it repositioned here. This sorry, it's getting dark out here already. Trying to use the lights now. You know, right through here, you don't need any because you got the O-ring, but you do have to go around this inside edge here with a little bead. And you see that dark line, that's where you want to follow with it. Like I said, don't overdo it, but you know, get enough on there that it's going to ooze out just a little bit. Yeah, so that's all I want to do with that now, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the water pump on, and then that oil filter adapter, and then we'll come back. Fortunately, it's getting dark already, and it would be the benefit of doing this in a garage, so you can have light, but I'm gonna have to work with some shop lights here. I'm doing this late in the evenings. But yeah, we're gonna do that, and then we'll come back. So actually, I'm gonna go ahead and put this crank sprocket on real quick and show you that. So I got the sprocket here. You got that keyway at 12 o'clock, and make sure you put that in there. I'm actually probably gonna put that in first. And I don't know if it's gonna show up because I can't really hold the light. Alright, so got that in there just like that. I'm gonna put this sprocket yes, I'm gonna need both hands to do that, but we're gonna get that on there. It's not on there all the way right now. Just want to make sure it's sitting flush and that keyway is, you know, coming out. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do all that, and then we'll come back. All right, I did want to show you this oil filter housing. Got the new gasket on there. Just make sure that screen is going down inside the little hole there. It's only one way you can put it on. Just make sure it's on there, you know, down in there pretty good, so don't get pinched or anything. So we're gonna go ahead and put that on. I just want to show you that, what that looks like with that gasket on there. Yeah, just make sure it's good and seated down there, so you don't get pinched when you try to put it on. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put this on, and we'll be back. All right, guys, so I went ahead and got the oil pump back on. Those bolts are torqued down to 8.7 foot-pounds, or if you do a conversion for quarter-inch torque wrench, it's about 105 inch-pounds rounded up. Let's see. So we got the timing belt back on. First thing, I put the new tensioner. See if I can get this on here. So straight down there is the new tensioner pulley, and then the idler pulley is on this side below the water pump. Can't really see it. I got this engine mount bracket back on. The torque for the tensioner pulley that mounts to the water pump is 19 foot-pound on that shiny bolt, that new bolt you can see down there. I replaced the bolt. It says to discard in the manual, so that's what I did. Did the same for the idler pulley. The idler pulley comes with Loctite on it on the new bolt, and that's 33 foot-pounds. So I put those on first. Then I did the hydraulic tensioner, which sits behind that pulley, with two 10mm bolts, and that's all. The 10mm bolts are 8.7 foot-pounds. Oil pan bolts, water pump bolts, the oil pickup tube bolts, the front cover bolts. Even though you put Loctite on the oil pump front cover, I keep calling it a front cover, but it's really an oil pump housing. So yeah, I got the belt back on. I am going to strongly suggest, this is the first time, like I said, doing a Honda 3.5 liter V6 timing belt for me. So this belt did fight me. I really thought it was going to go on as easy as it came off, but that wasn't the case at all. Kind of struggled with it. It had been hard to really film it because I needed both hands. But yeah, basically, I'm going to strongly suggest that you mark the old belt and transfer the marks to the new belt. So that's what I did. You can see these marks here. I got one up here, which is number 1, top dead center. And then I got one over here. I got 2 marks on this one, you can see. I just put a little B on there in between those marks, just to let me know that that was the back cam, and I put an F on this one for the front cam, so I knew where I was. And then I did 2 marks down at the bottom crank. I'll show you that. So you want to start on the bottom of the crank, and I'll show you what I did. So down here I got 2 marks. You see those? They line up with the crankshaft pulley there, sprocket. Yeah, you want to start there. So there's nothing going to hold this belt up when you put it on that sprocket. It's just going to, gravity is just going to make it fall straight down there in that valley. So I didn't have another person to hold it, so what I did was I took a chrome 3/8 14mm socket, and it fits right in there just perfectly, really, to hold that belt. So yeah, it didn't fit in there. You don't have to wedge it in there. I wouldn't put a lot of pressure on the belt. Anyways, you don't want to damage that belt. So it, I just stuck it underneath there to hold it up on the bottom of that sprocket. So got those 2 marks lined up, and then you want to work counterclockwise. So you want to go up towards the front of the engine. Oh yeah, I got the oil filter housing on. The 3 bolts there. The 1 bolt in the top right corner. Right. Let's see, you can't hardly see. Right up there, the top right one goes through that oil pump housing. So yeah, you want to get that on there first, because that the silicone is going to start setting up, and that Mopar stuff I use actually sets up really fast, a lot faster than I thought it was going to. So yeah, get that on there before you go any further, and then do those pulleys, and then the belt, and the hydraulic tensioner as well. And then you want to come up here. You're gonna go from your crank to the front side of the engine. Once you got those 2 marks that you transferred over on the crank, and then you're gonna feed it up over that idler pulley that's underneath the water pump. You can barely see the pulley down there, just the shiny one. Well, the light here, right there, just below the belt there. So you want to go around that, and then on the smooth side of the belt, and then come over here to this front cam. And there's the other mark I made down here. Let's see get a better angle here. Hang on, this lighting is just horrible. Alright, so you can see it there when I move this AC line out of the way. So that's the second mark down there. The first mark's top dead center, number 1, which lines up with your mark over here, which is really critical for your timing mark. And then you have the other one on this side, and then I have the other mark right here. So when I initially put it on, coming up this side on the front, the marks didn't line up. They were 1 mark off. So this line on the belt here was over on this valley instead of this one that I marked. So it was really 1 tooth off. And what would have happened was, or the reason why, is because there was too much slack on this side. So that's why it's really critical, I think, to mark your belt and transfer the marks, because you don't want any slack on this side. all the slack on this belt is going to be on this back side where the tensioner is. This side should be tight, and when you line these marks up, you're going to fight them. They're not going to go easy. Like you're pretty much going to have to like physically stretch the belt a little bit to get these marks. You almost don't even think it's going to stretch far enough. It looks like it's going to go just close enough and not make it. But after fighting with it and working with it, like I said, you want to be careful. You don't want to damage the belt, especially when you're sliding it on these things. You don't want to really slide this belt on any of these like cam gears or sprockets, especially on this one in the lower crankshaft. You only want to slide it over the smooth side on the tensioner pulley. Like I said, I had it and it was just too much slack. I could move this belt, like, I don't know if you can see it down in here. Like, you can see how I'm pushing hard and it's barely flexing. That's what you want. If it has any amount of give in there, then it's not tight enough on this side. So what would have happened is this slack on this side, if I would have left it like that and cranked it up, is it would have jumped a tooth, because there had been too much slack in here. Even if I got the tensioner, putting tension on it on the other side, it would have been just too much slack over here. So I had to just take it off and start over and wrap it around again, and finally I got it to where these marks line up. So once you get it, you go down around this cam here, then you go down underneath the water pump, and then you come back up and you're going over this cam. And then once you go around this cam, you're coming down and you're going to go over you can see it right here, it's over the tensioner pulley, and on the back side of that it's going to be on the pulley, which is right down in here, and that's where you want to slide it on. And if you have your hydraulic tensioner off completely like I did, there's no tension on it, it just flops up and down, and I thought that would make it really easy, but it fits tight. It's a brand new belt, doesn't have any stretch, it's going to fit tight. I would recommend putting the hydraulic tensioner on, bolting it up. The new one, if you should be replacing it, the new one comes with a little clip already in it that holds it back, which I'll show you that in a second. Just go ahead and bolt it up with that clip in it, just the same as not being there really. And then once you got all that, you want to double check your marks to make sure your 2 marks on top on each side, 2 marks on the crank all line up. And then make sure the crank's 12 o'clock keyway straight up, and then you got this mark here lined up with this one over here, and the same on the other side. The mark just going all the way across the belt back there. Once you do that, double check it, make sure there's no slack in it, make sure this thing's tight. Then you can release the tensioner pin. But you don't want to do that until then, because if you do, then you're going to have a lot more headache trying to redo it. So I'm going to show you, well, first I want to show you the belt here. So this is the old belt with the marks. You see I got my front cam and then the second mark right here. So you're just going to hold this up, because I couldn't really do it on camera because I needed both hands. But you want to match these ribs, line those ribs up with the other belt. You're just going to put it right here on this side. Let me zoom out a little bit. You're just going to put it right up and next to it. Just pick one mark. It don't matter where you start. It's a 360 circle. So once you got one mark lined up, the key then is just holding that belt and kind of like working your hand down slowly like this. And then once you get to your next mark, make sure those ribs are lined up. Make sure you don't have one a valley and one a peak, but you want it lined up, and then then you can mark your next mark, and then holding, you know, the belts next to each other, just working your way down. And then, like I said, you got the other belt on the back side of this one, and you're just working your way all the way you know, just keep going until you get to your next mark. Then you're going to transfer that mark to the new belt, then keep going, and then this is the crankshaft, so that's your second mark there. You're going to go all the way around to the other cam. I wouldn't try to, I mean, I guess you can lay them down together and try to lay one on top of the other, but it's really hard to make sure every tooth is exactly the same doing it that way. That's why I said I would recommend walking it slowly, and as you're walking it, you know, make sure those marks or those spots on the belts are, you know, the same. That's the way I did. That's the way I would recommend doing it. Now, go over here. This is the water pump. So when you do the water pump, one thing to watch out for is these dowel pins. You got one right here and then one over here. If you're doing a new Honda water pump, which you should, it's going to come with the gasket. This gasket's going to be positioned where it needs to be, so you're not going to have to mess with it. This one won't even go back in the position. You want to remove these dowel pins. When I took this pump off, I think it was this one here, this lower one, that was stuck into the engine. So you want to, if they don't come out with the water pump, you want to remove them. And then, because the new water pump comes with new ones. And like I said, these are 8.7 foot-pound 5 bolts going on it. What else was I going to say about that? I can't remember now. I'll probably think of it in a second. But this is your idler pulley. That's, the new bolt goes through there. It's 33 foot-pound. This is your tensioner pulley that's on the back side. Basically, there's a little metal spacer that goes in here, that goes in from the back, and it sits flush, comes out even flush with the front here. It allows this to rotate, allows it to go like swing up and down. Got that replaced with a new bolt. This bolt is 19 foot-pound. It goes through that center hole there, and that other, you gotta make sure the other piece. This one didn't come, the new one didn't come with that little center pivot piece. You got to transfer that over from the old one. And then you got your hydraulic tensioner here. So this is the pin that goes in this little hole like that, and your new one will come compressed. You can put these in a C-clamp or in a vise and compress them back in, and you'll see that little hole on the end there. You have to line up with that hole right here, and then you slide this pin through both holes to hold it in place. The new one's going to come compressed with a pin already in it. Now, this pin actually fought me whenever I was pulling it out. I got it all bolted up. The last step to do once you verified your timing marks is yank this pin out, and it shoots this little piston rod into this piece on this tensioner pulley right here. So it's going to hit that and push it into the belt. I had pulled on this thing, this new clip, and it moved like a 1/4 inch, and then it stopped. It would not go any further, and it ended up breaking off. This is the little piece right here. Let me see if I can zoom in there. Actually broke off in the piston rod in that center piece in that hole. The plunger came out, the little piston came out and hit the belt tensioner like it's supposed to, but that little piece was inside there still, so I had to use a little pick and push it out. And then, 'cause you don't want, if that happens to you, you don't want this little piece down in your timing belt later on when your engine's running to get stuck in there, because it's gonna mess things up. So it may not happen to you. I don't think that's common. It's just something that happens. So just going over that. So yeah, it's just something to keep an eye out for. Like I said, I've never heard of that happening before. I don't know why it started coming out and just stopped. Normally when you yank on those things, you give them a good tug, like a quick tug, and they usually come right out. I would probably recommend using like wire side cutters maybe to grab it and yank it and twist it, or not twist it, but you know, pry it straight, get it, you know, pry it as straight as possible without damaging anything like your water pump service or whatever you use for levers. Just be careful. So yeah, what I did want to say that I couldn't remember is on this water pump, I like to coat these O-rings with whatever fluid they're going to be in. So, you know, I dip my finger in the coolant water pump jacket. Still has a puddle of coolant in there, and I just, you know, lubricated that with coolant. Coolant, you know, has a little bit of lubrication oil in it to lubricate your water pump and everything. So I just, you know, run that over the, doesn't take a lot, just a little bit before you bolt that up. So going back over to the vehicle here. So yeah, once you get that in there, like I said, it's going to be down underneath that. That's the pulley that rod, piston rod, little plunger thing contacts. Right down there. So let's see if you can see it better. The pulley, anyways. Yeah, you can see the pulley on right there to the right of the shiny bolt. Once you get that in there, you know, like I said, verify your marks and then pull that pin out, and then pretty much done at that point. The only other thing you want to do is put your crank bolt back on. Don't forget your little keyway in your little washer. I think Honda calls it a timing belt guide plate or something. That little round washer that goes, that's beveled, that goes down there, and then you want to spin this engine over by hand. If you take the spark plugs out, it's going to spin over a whole lot easier because it won't have any compression. If you're, you know, willing to go that extra step, that way you'll know if you're making contact with any pistons, valves, or anything. But you know, it's not necessary. But you want to spin it over about 6 times total on that crankshaft. Every 2 revolutions of that crankshaft's going to be 1 revolution to these camshafts. That's the reason why you want to do this 6 times. After 6 times, you want to go up here and check all your marks again. If all your marks are good, then you should not have a problem. And if your belt's tight, it should not jump a tooth. But yeah, the biggest thing is when you're putting that belt on, like I said, you want to start coming around this front side, and you want to make sure there's absolutely no slack. You want to pull it tight. And it's kind of hard to do that and line your existing marks up at the same time. But it'd be well worth it in the end, because you'll know everything's right and you won't have to take it all back down and redo it. So yeah, once you get there, then you can put your engine mount back here. You got 3 bolts here. If you want to see that, you can go back to the earlier video and I'll show you where all those, you know, bolts are in there. There's 3 bolts going into the front of the engine. You got the one 10mm bolt holding this plastic wire bracket for the wire, and then you got your 2 bolts here on this top bracket piece, and you got your ground strap that goes in there, and then you have another bolt right down. So you get the light. Move this power steering reservoir. But you got the 2 vertical bolts there, and then you get the 1 horizontal bolt. That's a 17 millimeter. Those are 14 millimeters right there. Torque on those are 40 foot-pounds. Got all those in there, got them torqued, and then I took off the engine support brace. So now we're pretty much just, you know, at this point, just gonna, I gotta put the oil pan back on. I did get the oil pickup tube, the little plastic pickup tube back on with the 3 bolts. Got those torqued to 8.7 foot-pounds, or I just rounded up to 9, but gonna do the oil pan still. That's still not on yet. But yeah, I still gotta do the oil pan. You can see right here, you know, the front of the oil pans, you can actually see the pickup tube right there, plastic pickup tube. You got these 3 bolts on this oil filter housing. Make sure you do that right after you bolt this front oil pump on. Torque on those is 16 foot-pounds. So yeah, we got that. You know this oil pump's real critical. You know, I'm not so worried about the oil pan as much. The oil pan can be resealed anytime, you know, pretty effortlessly. Just drop the exhaust, you're right there. The oil pump, however, you know, you got to pull the whole timing belt off to take that thing off. So, you know, that you want it done right. You want, you know, to have the right amount of silicone, have it put together, you know, within 5 minutes of putting your silicone on there. You don't want too much of a bead squishing it in, because there's, you know, a lot of passageways that run through that oil pump that can have silicone get in there and plug it up. You got a lot more mating surface on the oil pan, so you don't have to worry about it, you know, unless you go crazy with it. Yeah, so I guess the next step, I'm gonna go ahead and put the oil pan on. I wish I could film it, but unfortunately I can't, because I'm doing this on jack stands and there's just not enough room to hold the camera. But basically I want to show you on the oil pan real quick. Alright, before I go over back to the oil pan, I want to show you this little bracket here. Make sure you put this back on. So it goes down around your crankshaft there, and you can see one of the bolts right here, a little 10 millimeter nut, and then there's another one up here that you can't see unless I bend down in there. You see it up there, top right corner. There's 2 bolts going across the crankshaft pulley there. I like to put the bolts and nuts back where I took them out if possible until I'm ready to reuse them. So basically, you know, it's just going to go on like this on those 2 bolts. You got these 2 holes right here. You know, you're going to be looking at, you know, you're at 8.7 foot-pounds of torque there. So don't forget that. So I'm going to go ahead and probably do that before I do the oil pan. But yeah, I'm going to go over to the oil pan real quick. I did want to show you a couple graphics. So on that idler tensioner, I'll show you that here. So this is that little spacer I was telling you about that slides through. It's got this flange on the back side of it, and it comes through that pulley. And then here's your bolt that goes through all that and bolts it down. Then you have your hydraulic tensioner here with a little plunger. It comes out and it contacts. It's a pretty bad picture really, but that's that little flange I was telling you about. So, you know, just to recap on the order, once you get your front oil pan cover or front oil pump cover on, you want to do the oil filter adapter housing, and then once you get that all torqued down, because you want to do it pretty quick before that silicone starts to set up, and then you can do your water pump and your idler pulley, your tensioner pulley, and then the belt, and that hydraulic tensioner. And we're gonna go over to the oil pan and show you that. All right, so here's the oil pan here. Let's see if I can. So basically you want to run, this is all cleaned up here, got it all washed up, pretty much ready to go. So you want to run your bead of silicone, you know, on the inside of these bolt holes. So you want to come here, go around the inside edge, come down, go around the inside edge, come around, you know, inside edge, all the way around. And then you know, on the front here, you want to make sure you get a good bead. This is going to go to your oil pump on the front, and that's what's going to seal that down at the bottom. So whenever you put this on, you're going to want to do this in stages with the bolts. So your final torque is going to be the 8.7 foot-pounds because they're all 10mm bolts, but you want to do it in 3 stages. So basically you just want to get them in there and go hand tight. With any bolt torque, you're putting like any kind of plate up or pan up like this, you basically want to start in the middle and do a crisscross pattern and work your way to the outside edges. I can show you what that looks like here. On Honda's got a sequence here. I can zoom in here. So this is going to be your, you know, 3 steps. You know, basically go hand tight, go back over it a little bit tighter, and then on your final step you're going to torque it down to the 8.7 foot-pounds. So these are the, you know, starting in the top there in the middle, that's your number 1. You're going to come down number 2, you're going to cross back up to 3, come back down to number 4, and just kind of work your way around. That's going to be the sequence there. So yeah, you're just going to, you know, basically the reason for that is just you're trying to get this area flat, trying to get it, you know, the purpose of torquing it and doing this pattern is because you don't want any more pressure on one point here versus the other point. You want it all, you know, flush and flat and square to the mating surface so it gets a good seal. The other important thing is you don't want any dirt or oil. You want everything clean, free of oil. Use some alcohol or brake clean. But yeah, once you get that done, the next thing to do is this little flange here. Well, you got these 4 17mm bolts that go into the transmission. There's no silicone around those. Those are going to be here in the corners. You got 1 here, 1 over there, and you got 2 on the bottom over here. Right over here. I don't know if you can see that or not. What in the fuck? Every fucking plane coming to Raleigh. Fuck. Alright guys, so I got the oil pan on, got the exhaust back up. One thing I did want to note on your oil pan, when you're putting this oil pan back on, make sure you take the dipstick out, the dipstick tube here. You want to remove that until you get the oil pan all on there, because it can get pinched in between the mating surfaces of the oil pan when you're trying to put it on there. One thing I did want to say on this engine mount here, these bolts are, the torque on these two bolts here, 40 foot-pounds. The one right down here is 47 foot-pounds. The crank down here, once I put everything back together, make sure you put this guide plate back on here. It's got these two 10mm bolts, one there and one up there, and then you got this timing chain guide that Honda calls this little washer. This does have to go on one way. It's beveled, the bevel facing out towards the wheel here. One thing you can do is put a little white mark up when you do your timing marks at this 12 o'clock. I put a little white dot on there. Reason for that, so I can know where my timing mark is without having to remove it. And the other reason is I know that side faces out, so that's the reason why I did that. But make sure you do not forget that, because that's going to keep that belt from walking. So I did put the crankshaft pulley back on to spin the engine over. I turned it over multiple times. You want to spin this crankshaft pulley at least 6 revolutions and make sure your timing marks all line up. Your marks from where you mark the belt in the second marks are not going to line up unless you turn it over many times to get those back lined up. But what you're looking for is the keyway at 12 o'clock, lining up with the mark behind this. See if I can take this off. You can see where I marked the little dot, and that lines up with that little arrow up there on the oil pump. Then you want to come up top, and you want to make sure your number 1 line is lined up with this line here. So you got the number 1, then this mark, and it's gonna be lined up with that mark. And on the back one, you only got 1 mark. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see where I marked it white, and it lines up back here with that one. There's only 1 mark on that pulley. These are the other marks here. These 2 marks were on the crankshaft, but after spinning it around, they're not lined up anymore. Don't worry about those anymore. That's just putting the belt on. So yeah, got all that good and ready to put the, make sure you put this lower timing cover on before you put your crankshaft pulley on for good. When you do put the crankshaft pulley on after that, you're gonna torque it down that 19mm bolt to 47 foot-pounds, and then you're gonna turn it an additional 60 degrees. So if you start at like 12 o'clock, and then you'll end up at like 2 o'clock, should be about 60 degrees. You can buy a torque angle gauge to give you that, but it's not really needed, unless you feel like you need it, I guess. What else did I want to say? Yeah, I got the exhaust back on, so make sure before you put your exhaust on, make sure you get this bracket. This metal bracket here, it's got 2 12mm bolts. The foot-pound on this is 16 foot-pound. I just got it tight. Didn't really need to torque that. But yeah, make sure you get that on there before you put your exhaust on, otherwise you're gonna have to drop, because the exhaust goes right here to this converter and it runs right over it. You won't be able to get to these bolts, and you'll have to pull the exhaust back off. So I did change all the exhaust gaskets. There's 3 of them. You got 1 or you got 2 go right here for each converter. There's 1 there, and then there's 1 back here, and then you got the converter in the back on the rear pipe, which is this bigger one. So you got the 2 smaller ones up front by the engine, and this 1 bigger one. And you can see these were chipping and cracking. Only one of these, this one here, was actually still decent. The other ones were all chipping and cracking and broke coming out. I did replace these lock nuts for the exhaust. You got 9 of them total. 2 of them are on the stud still here. These 2 studs came out right here on this front converter. 2 of these studs came out with the bolts, so I replaced those 2 studs because these are going to be rusted on there pretty good, so I just figured I might as well replace them. So I put those in, and in this middle section here there's no threads, and you can grab a hold of that with some pliers and get them snug, and then put the bolts back on. But yeah, I replaced them because they're all been beat up here with impact sockets and wrenches, and they're all rusted, so just put new ones on there. But yeah, this, the oil pan's already sat overnight with no oil in it. 24 hours is probably good enough. If you take it to a shop, they're not going to let your engine sit for 24 hours unless they have something else they got to work on or whatever. But most likely they're going to try to do this, let it sit overnight at most, and finish it up in the morning. So 24 hours is really good. I feel like if it's not going to set by then, or at least seal, it's probably not going to seal. So it's good to put oil in it. Go ahead now, because it's been 24 hours since I put it on there. But yeah, next thing is going to be put that lower engine cover, and then the crankshaft bolt, and then we can do the upper covers, and start putting the accessories, the serpentine belt tensioner, power steering pump. Then we can get the belt back on there, and it's pretty much going to be it. I am going to put a new power steering pump because mine was leaking, and I think I'm going to change this line here because it was leaking right here at this crimp. It wasn't bad, but it was seeping, and you can tell I cleaned it off here, but it had a lot of buildup and it was damp, so I know it's leaking. It's a common place for them to leak. So I may end up replacing that before I finish it all up here. But yeah, we're on the home stretch here. Could go ahead and put oil in if I wanted to, but I'll probably wait until everything's back together as the final step. But yeah, and got the battery disconnected. I did want to cover that too, because you know I spent an hour here, 30 minutes here, and sometimes even 15 minutes in the evenings after work. So it's been sitting for a while, so you definitely want to disconnect the battery, not just for safety reasons, but for you don't want your battery draining from sitting. So one thing I did want to say on those oil pan bolts, there's 4 bolts that are longer than the other. There's 18 total bolts. The 4 are in the back side. You'll know because it's the thicker flange on the oil pan. It's the thicker sections. You'll put the shorter bolts in there, and they won't reach the threads. They're just not long enough. So just kind of pay attention to that. I knew where they went, but without marking them or anything like that. Just something to be aware of, so you don't put a long bolt in a short bolt and then it not tighten down or bottom out the threads. But yeah, we're gonna get this timing covers on and get this crankshaft pulley on, and then keep on going. Alright, so I got the lower timing cover on. Got the 7 10mm bolts that's in there, holding that on. The torque is 8.7 foot-pounds. If you really want to torque it, I just use a 1/4 inch ratchet and socket, and I just know what's tight on that. I mean, it's just a plastic housing. You don't want to over tighten it and crack that plastic or strip those aluminum threads or anything like that, but I just like to snug it up. I know what tight feels like for a bolt in that size. Got the back one on here. One thing to note on this back one is you have this wire harness that runs here that snags into it. Just make sure you feed that back into that cover here. Just pushes in there just like that. Push it all the way around, and then just a pressure fit. Just make sure it's pushed in all the way down. Make sure all your connectors going to your sensors and solenoids are all connected as a final check. To make sure you got your ground strap on right here. Still got to do this front cover over here. One thing I want to know is make sure your gasket's in place going around. You gotta be careful on that bottom one. You gotta feed it from the bottom, and it's kind of tricky. Just make sure it doesn't fall out of place. You can put a little dab of silicone on the back side of it to hold it in if you need to. On this back one here, I did have to put it in at an angle, because it's going to meet with the lower cover down here. So if you ain't careful, you got a slot right here, and that slot goes on to the other one. Just got to make sure that's in there. Sometimes you got to go at an angle to get it down, sit in there. Just make note of that. Then once you get it sitting flush and flat, you just put your 5 bolts holding it in and snug them down. So we're going to do that with this side and keep on going. So I did want to say on these, out of these 5 bolts, the 2 in the back, let's see if I can zoom in here. See if I can get them on film here. So you can see that one down in there. There's the one, and the other one's down below. Those are pretty tough to get to. The one on top, I just used a ratchet here with a flex head, 1/4 inch like this. And just able to come in down here and get on it from the top. The other one I actually got from the bottom. It was easier to get on the bottom. The rest of them are pretty easy to get to. Just note that. what those are, because they're kind of got a feel for them. You can't really see them too good. Ones on the front side are pretty easy to get to. All right, just want to note that before we keep going. All right, so we got the covers on, and now we're going to put the crankshaft pulley bolt and crankshaft pulley on. Honda says they got this diagram here to lubricate and clean. Mostly you're going to be cleaning. It says remove any oil from the excess, which I've already cleaned up all that. Then it says to clean, you know, basically all the inner parts, where the inner side of the pulley, inside your sprocket. Then they show you that bevel washer. They're saying to remove any oil on that. And you can see the direction it's beveled, facing out. On the bolt itself, it says to lubricate the threads there in the black dots and around the head of the bolt itself. So I just put a light coat of oil, engine oil on there, and real light. Nothing too excessive. It just keeps it from rusting in there, because that bolt's hard to get out as it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that on, and then come back. All right, so I want to show you what I did here. I got the tool in there that holds the crankshaft from spinning. I got a ratchet, long ratchet here, going down the ground. Then I got a 3/8 torque wrench here, because it's only 47 foot-pounds. I went 49, I believe, just because this extension is going to affect the torque a little bit. It's going to reduce it some. And then you just do these in opposite directions. You know, you're turning, when you're tightening it, the crank's going to try to turn clockwise. So you want to, you know, on that holder tool, you want to have the ratchet going the other way, and you just want to grab both of them. And you can't do it on film because I need both hands to do that, but till you get that click, and then you're ready to do your 60 degrees. So what I'm probably going to do is take my white pen that I used to mark the timing belt and just draw a line on that bolt at 12 o'clock straight up and down, and then, you know, we're just going to go until that line's at 2 o'clock, and that'll be the 60 degrees, and then we'll be done. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch for that. I'm going to swap this 3/8 to a 1/2 inch drive for that, because it's going to take a lot more torque for that 60 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll be back. Alright guys, so we got the crank bolt tight. Going to show you the setup that I did for that. It took me a little while to determine the best way. Using that little holder tool for the crankshaft. Trying to get this cap on here real quick. Alright, so what I did was I put a long handled, I think it's like an 18-inch 1/2 inch ratchet on the back side there. You can see it sticking through the hole here. The ratchet's right here on the back side. And that's going up. So if you want to feed this, kind of put that ratchet in there and put it in that roundabout, in that position right there, and then you want to feed it up behind this frame rail here from the bottom. That was the easiest way that I found. Let me see. And then, you know, you got your 19mm. You're not going to get that big fat 19mm socket to fit in there. You just want a regular 19mm socket. It doesn't even have to be a impact like I have here, but I just use that for strength, because I know it's putting a lot of torque on this bolt. So yeah, you want that ratchet to come up here, and you want it to hit this engine mount bracket right here. Right now it's kind of You can see it right here. Right now it's leaning against the AC line and the ABS line. Well, it's not hitting the ABS module yet, but it will. If you put some torque on it, it'll push it back into the ABS module. So you kind of want to feed it, you know, push it this way, keep it pressure on it there so it doesn't move back, and put pressure on your brake lines on your ABS module. But you want to hit it like this, because when you try to tighten it, it's going to try to jam this ratchet into this engine mount and it's not going to let it move. That's the best way to do it. If you're trying to hold both of the ratchets, like with extensions down here from the bottom, if you got one, you know, on the crank bolt and one coming out through that holder tool, trying to hold both of them ratchets by yourself, I mean, it's fine, I guess, if you got somebody else to hold one while you torque the other one, but trying to do it by yourself, it's just going to allow that crank to move and you're not going to get your true 60-degree angle. So like this setup here, it's not going to move. So you can put your, I think this is probably like a 24-inch, half-inch ratchet here. I'll show you how I got it sticking out here. You can put this at 12 o'clock and go down to 2 o'clock. You can do 1 o'clock, go down to 3 o'clock. You know, however you feel comfortable positioning it. 3 o'clock, go down to, you know, 5 o'clock. I don't think I got a full 60 degrees out of it, to be honest with you. I put it at 1 o'clock and I couldn't make it to 3 o'clock. I tried and tried, and I put a ton of pressure on this thing and it just would not go. What it did do, however, is that I got 2 cracks on that nut. So when you're tightening that nut's gonna, instead of like moving, it's gonna crack and you're gonna feel it notch. I really think that's what you're going after, those 2 crack noises. I really think that's what you want, because after those 2 crack noises, I could not get it to move any further. I mean, I put enough pressure to where I thought I was going to break this ratchet. And this extension was flexing and everything was about to, you know, something was about to break if I'd have kept putting more pressure. So I think that's plenty tight. Like I said, I think you're really just going after those 2 little crack sounds. I'm pretty confident that's not going to ever come off, because I put a, you know, a shit ton of torque on it with all this leverage. So that's what I wanted to show you, because I know it took me a while to figure out the best way to position this. I tried positioning it where this holder tool would hit the bottom frame, but it really will fit through there and ride out. It would have enough torque on it, so I didn't like that. Plus, you had to put something in there like a piece of cardboard to keep it from scratching. I don't recommend that. This is the best way that I found, so this is what I'm going to recommend here. I just want to give you, you know, the best scenario for trying to do this. Got the belt tensioner in. That's down here. It's a brand new one. You see that new pulley right there on top. So I'll show you what this is, the old one here. So you got 2 bolts. This one holds the bolt on there, or this pulley. That you don't have to worry about. It's already tight. The new one comes with it if you buy the whole assembly. The bolt that goes through here, make sure you have the little washer like this one, the dust washer. Make sure it's facing, you know, the same way the flange is coming out, facing you, just like that one is. It goes down in there, bolt goes down in there. Then you have another bolt right here, a little 12 millimeter bolt that goes through here is a 14 millimeter. So you want to set this down in there, and it's a little tricky to get down in there, but it'll fit in there. Set it down, you know, like this, into position. You want to put this bolt in here, because once you get this down in position, you're not going to be able to slide this bolt in. If you don't have this bolt already in there, it's not going to go down. So yeah, you feed it down there with the bolt, and then you want to hand tighten this one. Start this big one, and don't tighten it, just get it hand tight, and then come and tighten this one on here at the bottom, this little 12mm. Get that hand tight. Once you got that hand tight, you can go ahead and torque that to 16 foot-pounds. Then you can come back and torque this one to 33 foot-pounds. But yeah, once you get that big one down to 33 foot-pounds, then you're done with that. You're ready for the belt. Besides putting the power steering pump back on. So that's the next step here. I'm gonna put the power steering pump on and then the serpentine belt. I am gonna pull this off. There's two little hex 5mm bolts right here. One right here, one right here. Make sure you unplug the connector. Got a little 5mm here, hex. Pull that out. Make sure you pay attention to how it comes apart. Sometimes I think these things are kind of like different directions, but just pay attention to how it comes apart when you put it back. Let's see, the power steering pump. So I'm replacing mine because it was leaking. It had an aftermarket pump on here. It was actually a reman Honda. It wasn't a Honda brand, it was a reman. It's a Honda, it was the original Honda pump, but it's been rebranded, rebuilt by somebody else, aftermarket. And they painted it black. You can see it rubbing off here. This is a new one that I'm gonna try. It's a brand I never used before. It's got a lifetime warranty, but unfortunately it was made in China. It's called Edelman Elite here. We're gonna give it a try. They claim that they take their design and base it on the OEM, and then they make improvements where the OEM fails. Just doing a little bit of reading on them. They give you this nice little test sheet here where they tested it. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a try. We'll see. I did find like 2 reviews online, and they were good reviews. So they claim that they succeed where the OEM fails. So I don't know. We'll see how it does, I guess. They do give you a pulley with it. It is cheaper than a reman Honda. Honda doesn't give you a new one, they give you a reman for like $400. So I think this one was like $250 or something like that. They do give you the pulley, but they don't give you this little fitting here for your reservoir line. So you got to transfer that. It's got this 10mm bolt in here. I've already removed it. I'm about to switch it over. They do give you 2 new O-rings. I already had the Honda O-rings because I was going to plan on replacing them when I took it off, before I decided to replace the whole pump. I matched them up. They're the same size as the Honda ones. The Honda ones actually look a little thinner, so I'm actually going to try these out. And it's made for their pump anyway, so give those a try. So, and I'm probably going to replace that pressure steering line as well. And I'm probably going to go with their brand too, so because they make a line for it as well. This company, that's all they make is power steering products. Let's see. Yeah, so but transfer that over. Make sure pay attention to your O-rings. One's small, one's large. I think the smaller one goes on the bottom. And you have your line that comes up here with the 2 bolts right in here. And I'm pretty sure I know why this one was leaking. It looks pretty wallered out in there, so I don't think it was getting a good seal. So this new one should fix that at least. There's where that flange goes, or no, right here, I'm sorry. That's where your line goes on top. Just pay attention to what where the large and O-ring go. Yeah, once you get this on here, transferred over, as with any O-rings, I always like to, whatever fluid they're going to be in, I like to lube them with. So we're going to lube them with a little bit of power steering fluid before I install them. Then we're going to torque these 2 bolts to hold the power steering pump on at 16 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and then we'll come back. All right, so I did go ahead and remove the ratchet and tool. I did want to mention that I did have that ratchet on tighten, or the on position if you have an on-off ratchet switch. So it was on the tighten. One other extra step you can do if you're worried about your timing marks or being off a tooth or whatever. If you go back to the beginning of the video, you'll see where I lined everything up before I took it apart, and I did that with the covers on and the crank pulley on. So you have these two little windows right here that open up. There's one on this one, and there's one on the back cam right here. Let's see if I can zoom in here. Right down here. And then you have notches on your crankshaft, and I can't see them right now, but you want to line it up with that tab on the lower lower timing cover. Trying to see if I can see it. So it's on the back side down there at the bottom. There's a little tab straight down there. I think it barely shows up. It's just like a little raised pointy section of the lower timing cover. You want to line it up with the little notch in the crank pulley on the back side of the crank pulley. If you line that up and then you open these windows, your marks should line up on both sides. That's just, you don't have to do that. It's just one extra final verification on the timing marks. If you had never done it before, then I would probably recommend it. So one final check before you start it, make sure your timing's good. So I just want to point that out before I go ahead and put this pump on, because now is the time that you'd want to do that while the belt and pump's out of the way. Alright, so we'll put this power steering pump on and we'll be right back. Alright, so I got this removed here. One thing I did want to note is you just want to pay attention to how this is. Try not to move it. When you're putting your power steering pump in, just try not to bump it and move it with your wrench or ratchet or whatever you're using. But just take a note, what it looks like, take a picture or whatever, and then that way if it does get moved, you can get it back in the same position. But I just wanted to note that before we go any further. Alright, so I got the pump in here. I just wanted to show you how I got this set up here. So I got my little 1/4 inch 12 millimeter. You can get it down like this on that bottom bolt. I'm just going to get it real snug. It's 16 foot-pounds if you don't know what that feels like. Then I guess you can get a torque wrench. I don't know if you can get one to fit in there without taking that pulley off though. This one would be easy because you can get it from right here up top. You just gotta be careful not to bang it against your pulley, your new pulley there. I guess you can get one down there in the bottom, but like I said, I know what 16 foot-pounds feels like, so I'm just gonna get it nice and snug without over tightening it. But if you need to torque it, if you don't know or unsure, then actually I'm gonna see if I can get a torque wrench on the bottom just to see if I can do it. Alright, so I'm gonna get the top one here first since it's the easiest one. Got my 1/4 inch here because that's about the only thing you're gonna get in here to fit. This is inch pounds, so you gotta do a little conversion. I think it comes out to 192 inch pounds. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And see, this one's already clicking, so I already had it tight enough, so I'm sure the bottom's going to be the same way. I just wanted to see if I can get it in there. Gonna have to add a swivel or an extension. Hang on one second. Alright, so you can get it in there with a little tiny short extension. So I got it set up in here. And go ahead and yeah, see, it's already clicking, so there's no need for that. Like I said, if you gotta wiggle it in there, it's a tight fit. I'll show you what I got here. This little baby extension here in the 12mm, but you can get it in there. So now I'm gonna hook this back up here and then plug it in, of course, and then we can run. I'm not gonna bolt the line in yet because I'm gonna replace it. I got a new one, and then I am gonna go ahead and put the serpentine belt on though. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll be right back. All right, so I went ahead and put this on here. It's not really in the way of putting that line on. So that's the only thing I got to do now is replace that line, put the serpentine belt on. I did drain my, make sure you put your reservoir back in the spot here. Just slides on that little tab right here. You can see the little clip that holds it down in there. I went ahead and drained the radiator. Probably a good idea if you're doing this at 100,000 miles. It's time for a coolant service anyways. So here's the new belt. I'm gonna put a new belt on here. It's a new Honda belt. About this Lyle kit here, it's number 24780. It's a spill-free funnel 18-piece set. So this is going to allow me to put seal here and be able to put coolant in this container reservoir and let it run. So it keeps it from boiling over and going on the ground when the thermostat opens up and it burps. So you can let it run and it'll burp in here, and splash in here instead of going over on the ground. The other way you can do this is if you have an air lift, you can put a rubber seal in here that hook to your air line, and it creates a vacuum on the system, and then it draws in the coolant, the new coolant when you release the vacuum. That's if you have access to an air compressor and you have an airlift kit. But this is the cheapest way. You can get this on Amazon. I think it was like $20 some. But yeah, we're just gonna get the belt on and hook don't forget your reservoir line here to the power steering pump with the 2 clamps. I gotta put that on there too. But I'm gonna wait until I get the belt on because it goes across here. Make it easier to get the belt in here. So this is the diagram in case you didn't mark your belt before you removed it. You got your power steering pump, your belt tensioner. That's where you're going to use your serpentine belt tool, which is this pulley right down here, or it's the top pulley on that tensioner that I showed you a little bit ago. Then it goes down the crank, goes around the AC, back up on the tensioner, the bottom pulley, and then to your alternator, back up to the power steering pump. So that's just in case when you use your serpentine belt tool. I have one, but it's buried somewhere. So when I remove this, I just use my 0 offset wrench here. It's a real long 14mm. I just went in here, got on the, let me see if I can get this on camera here. Get on the nut right here on this top pulley on this tensioner. Once you're on there, you're just gonna take your hand and push it back towards the firewall, and that's gonna relieve that tension, and you'll be able to slide that belt on. So you want to put the belt on all these rib pulleys, power steering pulley, crankshaft, AC, alternator, and where you're wanting to slide it when you relieve the tension is on these smooth pulleys, on this idler pulley. because that, it's a lot easier to slide the back side of this belt surface versus this rib area. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and put that on. I won't be able to film it because it's gonna require both hands here. All right, got the belt on there. Yeah, it does fit pretty tight. You gotta put a lot of pressure on that tensioner to get it. You gotta press it back pretty far to get that belt on there. So it's on there now. One thing you can do, you can rotate the engine a couple times from here just to make sure the belt seats, so it doesn't, if you're sitting on the edge or something, don't fling off when you start it. But you can double check and look down and look at all your pulleys and see if it's sitting, pretty good in the grooves and all, not about to slide off anywhere. If it is, just release the tension and slide it over. So once you double check all that, and then you can get that line on there, and the torque for these is 8 foot-pounds. I'll probably have to convert that over to inch-pounds, use my 1/4 inch. And then once I get that line on there and torque down, and I can fill my power steering fluid, fill my coolant, fill my oil, and then be ready to start it. And then hopefully won't have any odd noises or running rough or check engine lights. But we should be all good. Pretty confident everything's good. So I'm gonna go ahead and do all that. Probably gonna take it off the jack stands and everything, and get everything sitting down level when I put all the fluids in it. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and then we'll be ready to fire this thing up. Alright guys, so we got everything about together. I went ahead and started up. It was dark last night. It was pretty late, so wasn't able to get it on film. Everything started up fine, ran great, nice and quiet. No check engine lights. Took it down the road, has plenty of power. Just runs really good. So I did want to go over a couple things since I wasn't able to film it. As far as putting your coolant back in here, you want 2 gallons. I recommend getting the Honda stuff. You can get it at the dealer. It's already mixed 50-50. You don't have to mix any water with it. You're gonna need 2 gallons. It takes almost those 2 gallons if you do your water pump and drain your radiator, which I did. I did drain both of them. So if you're just doing the water pump, it's probably gonna take just 1 gallon. But I wanted to go ahead and flush everything out, get fresh coolant in there. So don't know how long it's been in there. So went ahead and did that. Took, like I said, almost 2 gallons. Yeah, I drained my power steering reservoir, so that took about a bottle, just over about a bottle and a quarter of another bottle. I actually went ahead and put this power steering line back on, even though I know it's leaking. It was a little bit wet right here last night after running it for about an hour. So I am gonna have to change it. So I got plenty of fluid because I got 2 bottles, so I got enough to go ahead and do that later. I just wanted to get it running because it's been sitting for a little while. The coolant, so I use this Lyle tool here. Just wanted to show you how that works because the instructions was kind of vague and not very helpful, and took me a little minute to set it up. So obviously this kit's made for multiple vehicles. First time I ever used it. Worked really nice actually. So on this one, I don't know if the Pilot and Odyssey will be different. Just depends on your radiator cap size, but they got different labels in here. There's 2 of these style caps. You got a small and a medium. This is the medium, letter B. Put that on here. You just want to get the one that fits. So this one fits pretty good. It's not tight. I mean, you can see how much play it has. It's real loose, but it fits a lot tighter than the other one. There's a large and I think a medium and a small. And I think the small one wouldn't even go on there. So you want to use the medium one. It's kind of notched just like the cap is. You want to put those notches in the cutouts. This is how it seals. So you want to find this. They got a bunch of these little fittings. I use this green one here. It goes down like this into your radiator. This again, it fits loose. I didn't think it was going to seal because I was like, it fits too loose, but it didn't leak anything when I put it in there, so it worked great. The smaller one was too small to go in there, and the big one was too big, so that was the only option left, and it worked out well. So I am gonna have to put it on pause here to set this up so I can show you. So you get all these kits, different sizes. I don't know if you can see those. You got ones for screw-on reservoirs or caps, like these here. They give you a bag of adapters, so you got 2 of these, and then you got some little 45s if you got like a tight bend you need to get around. So yeah, you got 2 little 45 elbows in there if you need to bend around if yours is in a tight. This one's right here, so there's no need for that. You got another metal style one there, but that one's like a stop sign shaped, so that obviously isn't going to work. So yeah, you just put this down like that, and you put this over top of it, and then you tighten it down like you would your radiator cap. Get it in the notches and twist it, and now it's tight. Now it's really snug now. There's no play in there now. And then you just want to stick this in here. This little adapter, it fits in there. It's just a snug compression fit. And then you set this jug on top here, just like this, down in there. So that's how you're going to set it up right there. You probably don't even need this extension here. I just liked it elevated personally, but then you put your coolant down here, and basically I just use this as a funnel to begin with, just putting real slowly. The first gallon, it took the whole gallon, didn't even fill this up. It just all went down into the radiator. So I went real slow. Once you get this radiator full, you don't want to fill this up because you're going to have too much. It's not going to, once your radiator's full, it's not going to take a lot more after that. So I recommend just filling it to this bottom line right here, this little crease right here. That's what I did, and just keep it at that level. And then you start your engine, let it run 20-30 minutes. You just want it to get the normal operating temperature. Obviously you want to take this out. This is actually the fluid control. This plugs the hole so fluid doesn't go down. You don't need that unless you're removing it. But yeah, if you still got coolant in this thing when you're done, I gauged it to where I didn't. I'd put just enough in there to where it would suck it all down and be full, and then just topped it off a little bit, that way, because I didn't want to deal with a bunch of fluid in here, coolant, trying to not spill it and all. So that you would put this in there if you got a bunch of coolant in there to cut off the flow, so you could remove this without it draining out down the bottom. But you don't want it in there while you got it running. The purpose of this is to have an open system, so when that water pump, or that thermostat rather, kicks open and the water pump's circulating water into the engine and through the system, there's going to be air pockets because you got air in your engine now where you took your water pump off. So when it circulates that coolant through, it's going to work those air pockets out, and those air pockets are going to be trapped, and you're going to overheat the engine if you can't let them get out. So with the open like this, it allows it to burp, and you'll see it bubble when it starts circulating real well. You just want to let it run for like a good 30 minutes, let it all circulate a couple times, open and close that thermostat multiple times. I revved it up a little bit to like 3 grand RPM for 30 seconds at a time. But yeah, so that's that. I just want to go over that procedure if you've never done that before. If you just fill the coolant and put the cap on, you're probably going to overheat the engine. Just to give you a heads up on that, because you're going to have air trapped in there. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pause it and put this up, and then start it up and let you hear it. So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and put your cap on, make sure it's screwed down and tight. Make sure your reservoir is full to the full line, because if it does have any extra pockets left over, so it can suck that fluid down, just fill it up to the max line. and then just keep an eye on it for a couple days after that. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and fire this thing up. Make sure all your power steering's full. I mean, oil's full. Then you can go ahead and fire it up. All right, so there she is. She's purring now. Got a little bit of a chirp sound coming from the clutch. It goes away whenever you press the clutch a little bit. Don't recall it doing that before it was sitting, so I don't know if that's something that's going to go away or not. It's not real loud right now, so we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If it's helpful, if anybody out there, I'm sure there's a lot of other videos on how to do Honda timing belts. It's the first time I ever done it on one of these Honda 3.5s, so it took me a while, a little bit of learning curve. I wanted to make sure that the video ended up being a lot longer than I wanted it to, but I wanted to make sure I covered everything and did a thorough job, and so you have everything that you need to do, start to finish. I wish I could have filmed more of the actual procedure of things, but it's kind of hard without having a camera person. But yeah, if you have any questions, just put them down in the comments. Hope you like the video and get subscribed, and next projects we'll keep posting. I'll see you guys on the next one.